Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If everyone in the gallery could please take their seats and settle down. Call this meeting to order. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, May 15th, 2017. The clerk tonight is Ms. Sheila Gurry, and I'd like to first acknowledge that we are having this meeting on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nations. We do have a scheduled recess for 9 p.m. should we require it. And I want to first off start with council meeting, with a statement concerning council meeting decorum. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists. Each councillor brings to the meeting their own individual personalities, attributes, abilities, and values. Each member of council is required to be respectful, not interrupt or disrupt another member of council, staff, or the public when they do not have the floor. Important attributes of the mayor and councillors include being fair and reasonable, objective and impartial, firm but friendly, confident but considerate, tactful and courteous, and confining discussion to within the scope of the meeting and within reasonable limits of time. Therefore, there will be no cheering, jeering, or other outbursts from the gallery to ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and do so freely without fear of ridicule, particularly during the business portion of the meeting. The microphones of anyone that is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit will be cut off. If there are any outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop, and if they do not comply, they'll be asked to leave. A recess is another tool we may use in order to reset the environment of the council chambers. It's our belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. So, Ms. Gurry, could we have introduction of late items, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. On the addendum this evening, we have item 5B, RCMP Policing Priorities Presentation. It's being removed. Item 5C, presentation from Nanaimo Deep Discovery Association, is being added to the agenda this evening. 5D, presentation from Wilton Broad Players Art and Theatre Society, is being added to the agenda this evening. Agenda item 9B, 91 Chapel Street Development Permit 1034, we're replacing the report. Agenda item 9D, development permit number 1047. We're adding delegations from Jim Goldsack and Andre Molnar. We're removing agenda item 9F, tree removal permit from 5746 Melpass Road. And we're adding agenda item 13A, notice of motion from Councillor Beswick with respect to rails to trails. And also, Your Worship, I just wanted to make a comment on late items, because there was some back and forth this week with some potential delegations and delegations that were added. So in order to follow the processes that are outlined in our procedure bylaw under 16.1 that has been brought to the attention of council by a delegation recently, the addition of essential items, which would include matters that have arisen after the preparation of the agenda, which we do on the Tuesdays preceding the meetings, we would if they needed to be acted on in a timely manner, we would add them to the addendum, which we do on Fridays. Or elective items, which are just purely administrative in needs, we would add those to the addendums on Friday as well. So in an effort to not have late items that the public don't have a chance to speak to, we are asking council to follow the processes outlined in this procedure bylaw. And if you do have a delegation or something you would like to add to the agenda, we would like those additions to be voted on seriatimally, like individually, and not as an when you amend the agenda, and voted on that way. So it's to follow the processes outlined in the procedure bylaw. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other late items, Council? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I honestly don't know what Council wants to do with this, but we did have a presentation made to us several weeks back, and we were asked to consider two requests from the Nanaimo Pride Society, and we failed to do that. I would like to bring them forward under other business, and that would be Nanaimo Pride request.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Hong. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call the question on that item. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So that will be under other business. Thank you. Motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Hong.
I wanted to add something under notice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another late item?
It's just a notice of motion.
Notice of motion. Okay.
That I want staff to help me with the wording for next week, or 3 weeks, I guess, is something in the lines of direct staff to develop a consultation process for blasting in neighborhoods.
Okay.
So not a bylaw.
You can keep that general, Councillor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Bring it under notice of motions. Ms. Sammer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to support the City Clerk's discussion about when you're adding a late item, whether or not it is urgent or administrative, and to give some context, because after making that presentation, Council went and voted to add something for Pride Parade. And the reason why that is urgent is that a decision has to be made about funding for it, and your next meeting isn't till after the scheduled parade, and for that reason, it does qualify. That said, staff only had wind of that today and only had a few hours to start taking a look at what the potential costs, so we'll do our best to advise you when this comes up on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other late items? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we've got some minutes here. So we're looking for the adoption of minutes for April 10th, 2017, April 19th, 2017, April 20th, 2017, April 21st, 2017, April 24th, May the 1st, and May the 1st. As a block, Councillor Bestwick moving, seconded by Councillor Hong. Been moved and seconded. Is there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now we're on to presentations. So the first one tonight, is in recognition of the 2017 John Hobday Award in Arts Management. Much of the success of any performance, exhibition, or other arts presentation is due to the efforts of arts managers who work behind the scenes to find sponsors, develop budgets, apply for grants, plan events and performances, negotiate contracts, train and manage personnel, and countless other things besides. These people deserve thanks and support. This is why the Canada Council for the Arts offer the John Hobday Award for Arts Management. Each year, 2 $10,000 prizes are awarded to talented individuals with solid track records in arts management, giving them the chance to enhance their own professional development. By nurturing and developing their skills, all of us in the arts community, including the Canadian public, benefit. This award exists thanks to the endowment from the Samuel and Sadie Bronfman Family Foundation. Its namesake, John Hobday, was himself a longtime arts manager before becoming director of the Canada Council for the Arts in 2003. As you would expect, this year's John Hobday Award recipients are both dedicated and well-respected arts managers in their respective domains. Here with us this evening is Holly Bright. Holly Bright is the recipient of the Mentorship Award and is the founder, creative director, producer, and dance presenter of Crimson Coast Dance Society here in Nanaimo, BC. Guided by mentors Star Marenko, which is the artistic associate, and Michelle Olson, the artistic director of Raven Spirit Dance, Holly will undertake a project to assist her in gaining knowledge of First Nations cultural pathways and performances with performing artists and families of the Nunavut First Nations. We are honored to present this award on behalf of the Canada Council for the Arts to Ms. Holly Bright. got a couple of things for us. It's not a.
Who's taking pictures?
Hello?
Where's the picture?
It's not that really big check. I see it's just a plaque. But for all the work that you've done so far, I mean, it's been unending, and we want to thank you for, and we want to really appreciate the fact that how well deserved this is today, in you receiving this award. Now, I know you might want to say a thing or two, so you're not going to get 23 minutes. But I'm going to trade you for the microphone, and so that you can say a few words. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Haichka. Aisquail. Asiam na siyeach. Asiam na squaham. Asiam na. I'm learning the language, and I am so grateful to my teacher Gary Manson for leading this class. And what I was intending to say was thank you to respected First Nation friends and people, and thank you to my friends who are here this evening, and thank you to City Council for taking the time to acknowledge this moment. I'm incredibly grateful to do my living on Snuneymuxw First Nation territory and on a land that has been kept pristine for hundreds of years. And I offer a plea and a petition to those of us who have capacity and those of us who have authority to ensure that we continue to do that, and particularly in consultation with our Snuneymuxw First Nation elders. I moved here in 1992. And there was no place for what I do here, which was contemporary dance. I was a contemporary dance artist. And I commuted back and forth to Vancouver for 4 years. And in 1996, I decided to bring a piece of my own here to see if there was an interest. Maybe there was an interest in what I did. And with the support of the Nanaimo Arts Council, I produced a show, and it was well received. I started to teach here, and then from then on started to bring productions here that featured artists from across Canada, and joined forces with Theatre One, the Symphony, and the Nanaimo Art Gallery. We were the only 5 organizations in Nanaimo producing art. And I want to tell a little story which really helps to place Nanaimo's shift and transformation in context. I went to Jasper in 1999 and was in the ski shop. I went to do a little skiing, and the woman at the counter in the ski shop said, "So, where are you from? What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I live in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, and I present professional contemporary dance." And she kind of screwed her head up and turned it sideways, and she said, "You present professional contemporary dance in Nanaimo?" And what that did was tell me 2 things. One is she knew what I did, and the other was that she knew what the challenges were that I faced, and in some way what the reputation of our city was. It was a little challenging at the time. This is 1999. So I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, kind of screwed her face up and turned her head the other way, and she said, "Do you have an audience for that there?" And I said, "Well, it's small, and I'm offering a lot of educational opportunities for people to understand contemporary dance and learn about the form, and people are curious." And I'm not kidding, but the whole time that she, I could actually probably not use this. The whole time that she was talking to me, she rolled up her sleeve, and then she said, "So your audience, they applaud like this?" I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. 1999, Nanaimo had a lot of challenges. And what I'm here to say, and the reason that I told you that story is, yes, it shocked me. It shocked me to know that that's what was thought of when people thought of Nanaimo, that we were a resource-based town that had not a lot of culture and a lot of social challenges. And in some way, this award places Nanaimo's success and transformation in context. It places it in a national context because it's different now. People don't talk about Nanaimo in that way. And there have been a lot of people who have worked to make that transition happen, both in social services, in healthcare, and in sports and in arts and culture. And we've all worked together to make a beautiful city, and it continues to grow, and it's being done mindfully. And I believe that the arts really have impacted this growth and change because what we do is accessible to everyone, regardless of whether they're marginalized in terms of economy or health or education. What we offer is available to everyone, and we offer these fantastic creative processes for them to bring forward their own ideas, their creativity, to become empowered, and really to enjoy what's beautiful. And that's essential. And that's what we bring. And I believe that our part in this shifting reputation of Nanaimo has been significant and important. And very specific ways that happens is when we bring artists into our community and they go out after a really fantastic experience here and talk about it with their peers and colleagues and families and friends. And the other way that that happens is when our grant applications go to the funding bodies and the juries sit around. The jury's made up of really established, well-respected arts managers and artists and individuals who adjudicate the grant applications and talk about Nanaimo. They talk about the history and how it has changed and evolved. And then when I go out and talk with my presenter colleagues at national conferences and let them know, for instance, that the city of Nanaimo has chosen to take our granting process and align it with the federal and provincial bodies' granting processes, it's impressive, and they talk about it. And that's how our reputation has shifted and changed, along with all the other good work that's been done here in this community. So it's really a celebration of all of us, and I have stood on some really strong shoulders. I rely on my artistic colleagues through the Arts Managers Group and through our community arts groups. Now we have theater and music and dance everywhere, and it's really exciting. And what I'm incredibly honored and gifted by through this award is the opportunity to explore First Nations culture and my vision in this little shift in my career is to make that place that we hold bigger and to really learn how to best serve a culture that is way overdue in its opportunities to bring forward the beautiful art and culture and history of the people in a way that we can all see it and share it, honor and respect it. So thank you very much to everyone for being here. Thank you for this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Holly Bright. Thank you very, very much. So the next presentation is the Nanaimo Deep Discovery Association. Mr. Lauren Hildebrand, President of the Nanaimo Deep Discovery Association, and Tim Tessier to discuss a potential location for the Ocean Discovery Center.
Thank
Good
you
evening,
very
gentlemen.
much. Hello, everybody. We at our last appearance before council, one of the things that you asked us to provide was a business plan. And so I hope you all have that. I brought extra copies if you great, you all have that. Wonderful. So we are here with our site selection committee sitting over there. Folks have put lots of hard work in. And we would like to make the next step. if you would be so kind as to allow us to do that. We're in the process of looking for funding. We have made some excellent contacts, but as we said the last time we spoke, was very difficult to do that without a site. And so we know it would be very difficult to just give us one. We understand there would be lots of conditions. We understand that we would have to work with the city and the city staff to get that looked at. But if you would look at page 20, if you look at page 26 of your plan, there is a photograph, and we are looking at a small corner near the water on the right-hand side of that. There is still lots of room for a walkway around that, but this is the area that we would like to have the city consider. Tim?
Thank you, Lauren. I want to start, I don't think we want to stand here and try to convince anyone that the Ocean Discovery Center is a good idea for the city of Nanaimo. We've had the opportunity to see the technology which is being courted not only in other regions but in other parts of the world that we can bring and put on display and create this world-class facility. But it is absolutely essential we locate our facility on or very near the waterfront. We also feel it's absolutely essential that this becomes part of a community gathering center for the city of Nanaimo. It has to be within the confines of our downtown core and Mafio Sutton Park and so forth. And the city of Nanaimo has some of the most amazing parks and walkways in Canada and North America. But what we need is that community gathering point, and we need to bring it inside of the city of Nanaimo. And that's what we're asking for today. We recognize the planning process and we recognize the consultation that's required by other community members. That's fine. But in part of the planning process, we're going to ask you to make a motion tonight that will allow us to go back with city planning and staff and begin to work on a site selection and feasibility so that we come back to council on June 19th with a presentation, at which point we will ask for a memo of understanding if we meet certain considerations that the Ocean Discovery Center will be one of the key, or let me put it again, will be one of those centers as a community gathering and a feature for the city of Nanaimo as a top priority in that land that Lauren has identified for you. Any questions?
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Comments more than questions, gentlemen, but when you were in front of us last time, we did ask you to go back and do more diligence and research on your own feasibilities and the business concept, if you will. And I don't think anybody would suggest that this project is iconic and one that would bring considerable notoriety to an evolution of more development and growth in our downtown core and be a significant attraction for locals, Vancouver Island and residents and beyond, of course, and I know that that's your goal and objective. The package that you have presented in front of us that those at home may not have access to, I'm trusting that this will go on our website so that people can. And it is extremely impressive. I think you've done everything that we asked you to do since you were here last. And if nobody else does, but I do have a motion prepared for once it's appropriate. So thanks very much. That's comments, no questions. I think what you've answered all my questions so far. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to let council and members of the public know that their presentation will be added as a supplemental item and posted on our website tomorrow.
Thank you.
It'll also be on our website as well, too. So there's probably 10 or more.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming again in front of us. I've always thought this was an extremely exciting project and one which I think has great potential to benefit Nanaimo. And Councillor Bestwick has indicated that he might be prepared to put forth a motion, and I would certainly support that. So thank you for coming, and we'll see if we can move this forward.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I'd like to echo the words previous council members. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming forward this evening again, and I look forward to being a supporter of such a wonderful initiative. And also, it really pleases myself to sit here and see Mr. Mannix on your board and in attendance tonight, that he'll bring a nice flavor to your board of already profound people, but Dave's a great addition to that, or to have on your board, I mean. So just want to acknowledge Dave and along with your board for the great work. Thank you. Heichka.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. One of the key factors that we've discussed, as we know from the previous event center issue, was parking. You're expecting 70,000 people to go through the doors in the first year, I think, roughly. So where are they going to park? I think that's the one of the key questions on where the parking is going to be. It doesn't say if you needed space for parking. I see that the building itself is 3,400 square meters, but that's just or 3,200 square meters, sorry. But it doesn't reflect the overall size that you're requesting. How much land are you requesting from the city? Are you requesting a parking lot as well?
No, we're not requesting a parking lot as such. We only need about 50 spaces actually at the facility itself. We think there's room for parking both in the existing city parking lots and perhaps over in the Nanaimo Port Authority lands. And it's been a little hard for us to sort those things out because we don't have a place yet. So asking us where we're going to park when we don't even have a place, we'd like to get into that, and we've certainly done a lot of thinking around it. There is a lot of parking that's being not used with the city itself, and we think we would like to help fill those spaces. And there certainly is the opportunities on the Nanaimo Port Authority lands, and we've been talking to those folks as well too. So there will be parking. We did have an idea that if the parking was a little bit larger and there was other kinds of facilities coming up, that the center could run a small, service where we drove people from parking lots to other parts. So we certainly are thinking about that. And the actual square footage of the area, I'm just going to ask Tim, do you remember what Dave, our architect?
Yeah, this is you've all got the renderings, and we've engaged an architect to come up with the initial draft of our design. As far as the facility itself, the footprint will be in a range of 12,000 square feet over 3 levels. The physical size, we're looking for about a quarter of an acre, 25,000 square feet.
Great, thank you, and I agree with you. There is a lot of parking downtown. I just didn't know if you guys were planning on putting a parking lot right in front.
We've been working with a retired city planner, and he's been focusing on what type of size and number of stalls that we will require.
Okay, so you need a quarter of an acre roughly, and that includes parking in the cute little pond as well?
It's more than a pond.
Yeah, but including all that as well.
Effectively, it's a freshwater, it's part of our Ocean Discovery Center so that people will have a sense of submerging. So yes, we'd call it a moat. More than a moat.
But if your footprint is 12,000 square feet, including, I'm just trying to do the math, quarter acre?
12 is for the building.
Yes, so but a quarter of an acre is only 12,000 square feet. Am I not correct? 44,000 square feet is an acre. 22,000 is half an acre. 12,000 is a quarter acre. So quarter acre only gets you the building. I'm asking like the total size that you require.
There would be a little bit more for parking. We're not exactly sure what that would look like.
Okay, yeah, like would it be easier for us to figure, how much space you need before we commit to space?
But if you look at page 26, and we actually did a site visit, if you look at page 26, right beside, and it's kind of hard to point it out, but if you look at page 26, and you look at the water and the rail terminal, there's a building there, a small brown building. And if you just go a little bit past that and draw a line across and then down by those cars, that is exactly the area that we're looking at.
Staff, do you have this presentation? Because if I'm not mistaken, that's the Bowtie property that we don't own. Am I not mistaken?
No, that is not. The bow tie land is a little bit farther over.
I'll wait to hear from staff on that one.
Perhaps you can help, because you've got a little symbol on page 26 over top of a corner of that building that shows, I don't know, looks like a little boat in a blue box or some such thing like that. What's that intended to?
That is not off of our picture. If you move to the right of that, looking down at
Gotcha.
everything, to about the first set of the second line of parking, that would be the line there. The bow tie lands are actually out in the water and actually go right beside that funny looking marker.
Yeah.
But we are to the right of the bow tie lands and not on that.
Okay, good. I thought it was the marker. That's why I'm so confused.
Sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Motion to receive has been put forward by Councillor Bestwick. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Just ask City Manager, City Clerk, is it appropriate to make a motion at this time?
You can go ahead. That would be appropriate.
That being the case, then I would so move Council direct staff to investigate the feasibility of placing the Ocean Discovery Centre at One Port Drive and include as part of the One Port Drive public engagement.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion.
If I could just
speak to it.
Yes, please. If I could just speak to that, just using the One Port Drive address so that it leaves the options for consideration and contemplation a little more fluid for staff while they're going through the planning stages of the trail network, of other potential opportunities that may or may not exist as we know them today. As we go through the process, I think that it gives the proponents a level of comfort to know that we are supportive conditionally and in principle to the waterfront site known as One Port Drive for this initiative. And we'll let the details play themselves out over the course of the coming weeks. So full support and endorsement of the gentleman's application to move this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly endorse moving this forward as well, and I'm pleased that I'll be able to support the motion, and I look forward to staff working with the group to look at that site specifically and take it to the next step and move things ahead as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I also wanted to say that I support this project. It's come a long way since its infancy, when it started in North Vancouver, and the City of North Vancouver rejected it because at that point it was nothing more than a museum, a static museum. Where it's gone from there is it's taken the best of the best ideas, and it's now going to be interactive. It's going to have a much greater component to it. It's going to have First Nations history as well. It's going to have all of those things that make what I can see a successful tourist attraction. So I'm completely in support of it. I see no further questions. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So our next presentation is the Wilton Broad Players Art and Theatre Society. Richard Broad, President, WBP Art and Theatre Society, and Melody Wilton, Artistic Producer for the WBP Art and Theatre Society.
Good evening. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? Unfortunately, Richard Broad is not able to be here tonight. He's working on a film in Vancouver. My name is Melody Wilton. I am the artistic producer for the Wilton Broad Players Arts and Theatre Society, which is a nonprofit society. I am here this evening to invite everyone to participate in our call for poetry and prose, celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary. The poetry and prose that we're calling for is themed poetry on the question, what does Canada's 150th anniversary mean to you? Some people say it means nothing to them. And to me, that means you've got something to write about. Other people have various cultural impressions. We already have quite a really good collection, including we have a contribution by our Canadian Parliamentary Poet Laureate. And we are quite proud that he has found that putting an entry into the Wilton Broad Players Canada's 150th anniversary anthology is worth writing and thinking about. So we would like to invite the mayor, the council, the public, everyone to send in a submission themed on that question. And that means themed, which it's how you interpret the question. I have sent a flyer in front of everybody. I think everybody's got one tonight. And so the limit of words is strictly for layout. We might wiggle a bit if you have a really interesting submission. We do have a panel of published writers, artistic people that belong to the Federation of Writers, IATSE, Federation of BC Writers. There's a list of different qualifications that the board has. Is there any questions for me? I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you, Ms. Wilton. Nice to see you, and thank you for your efforts on this. I was just going to ask, because I don't think you'd be interested in any poetry that I might produce, but have you...
You never know. We want to see it all.
But I did want to ask if you've considered extending an invitation to our city poet laureate and our youth poet laureate.
Absolutely.
Great.
Everyone is welcome. Everyone. We don't have an age limit on it. And our youth poet laureate, Kaylee Defer, has already contributed 3 poems. And she has presented poems we did for Poetry Month at Vancouver Island Regional Library. We have another one we're hoping to be doing at the university when the collection is complete and ready to go to print or has been printed. Also, Tina Bilio, Nanaimo's Poet Laureate, also has contributed poetry.
Oh, that's great. Thanks very much. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions. Motion to receive the Councillor Bestwick.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item is the Mayor's report, and I want to start off by saying, because I didn't get a chance to call her today, happy birthday to my sister Diana in Courtenay, BC. I had the opportunity today to spend time at the Nanaimo Child Development Center. The CDC celebrated today their 50th year supporting children and their families in Nanaimo. The programs and services include occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech-language therapy, infant development program, supported child development program, child and youth development program, family development program, the CARE program, early childhood education and complex developmental and behavioral conditions program. I also wanted to, I told them I would give a shout out tonight with respect to a charitable event that's being held on May 23rd, 2017, which is just a couple of weeks away at the Port Theatre. The event is called Comedy for a Cause, and it features Jason Hewlett, a man of many voices, faces, and impressions. Tickets range from $50 to $79 and include other offers during the course of the evening. Ticket sales are light right now, so go to theporttheatre.com for more information for this great event to support this very needed and worthwhile cause, the Nanaimo Child Development Center. I attended over the weekend the unveiling of a new piece of art under Nanaimo's public art program. This one was called The Hungry Bunny. It was created by a local artist by the name of Mr. Dale Schultz. And it should prove to be one of those iconic pieces in the program, along with another work on the opposite side of the park called Lunar Flyer by Heather Wall. I have to say public art is being overwhelmingly accepted by the citizens of Nanaimo, to be amazed at the variety, and I continue to be amazed by the variety and the quality of every new piece I see in my travels. Put on your calendar 3 upcoming open houses concerning the waterfront walkway that are happening this week. The first one is this week on Wednesday at 10 to 6 at the Kin Hut in Departure Bay, followed by 10 to 6 on Thursday and 10 to 4 on Saturday, both at Maffeo Sutton Park. Please take the time to pop in and look at what is envisioned for this very exciting project. You're also invited to the kickoff luncheon at 11:30 on Wednesday at the Country Grocer. It's the kickoff of Bike to Work Week. Bike to Work Week runs in Nanaimo from May 29th to June the 4th. And everyone's welcome to go to the kickoff event. We were all given T-shirts, but we couldn't seem to get everybody on the same page as to whether we were going to all wear them tonight or not. They've convinced me to do the bike to work this week or this year, so I'm going to be starting a few days early, and so I get my 5 days in. Nanaimo does in fact have a team, and you can go on to the intranet, any of the councillors, and you can determine, you can do the sign up over there. Lots of exciting things going on. Thank you very much. So the next item is
Mr.
under
Mayor?
administration.
Sorry.
So, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, I just wanted to follow up on your comments regarding public art, because also this past weekend, I know you were there with the unveiling of the artwork on the fencing around the Gene Burns building site. Not only some original artwork, but also some really fascinating photos of Nanaimo from the old days. And I encourage residents to have a look at that if they're downtown.
Yes, absolutely. That was absolutely amazing to see all of the different pictures, particularly of the location itself, and all the different permutations from the early 1900s right through to today. So next item, of course, is under administration, and that is advisory committee minutes. First one is the Public Works and Engineering Committee. Be introduced by Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Chair. This was our inaugural meeting. It was great. The members of the group come from very diverse backgrounds in our community. I'm excited to be chair of this committee, and we're excited to look at existing policies and revisiting and updating these policies to better suit the current standards and situations for the people of Nanaimo. So I would like to move the minutes held on November 9th, 2016.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Kipp. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is the advisory committee minutes for the Community Vitality Committee, to be introduced by Councillor Fuller.
I'm actually not prepared for that.
Okay.
I'll move the advisory committee minutes, the Community Vitality Committee held on December 7th, on the inaugural minutes.
Thank you. Be received. Thank you. It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fuller, would you like the second?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm just blown away. I never even.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is the advisory committee minutes of the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I would just so move the Finance and Audit Committee meeting minutes for March the 8th. There are approximately 4 items on that agenda. Heritage facade grants and heritage grants, 10-year financial plan implications, among others. It was not our inaugural. It's about number 6 in a series of many, which leads us to opportunities to discuss items of significance around a board table and open to the public. And the agendas are published. So move the minutes of the Finance and Audit Committee of March 8th.
Moved by Councillor Beswick, seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is under Community Services. And the first item is 9A, Northfield Boundary Highway 19A intersection upgrade, to be introduced by Mr. Brad McRae, Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, before you tonight is a request from staff to give direction to proceed for the Northfield Boundary Highway 19A intersection upgrade. As you may recall, this intersection has been problematic due to both vehicle collisions and proximity to other intersections. At the May 9th, 2016 council meeting, Council directed staff to place the project in abeyance for 1 year as the future of rail was uncertain. As of today, there has been no change to the existence of rail in the area. As it's been 1 year and no change to both rail and safety needs, staff recommend proceeding with option 1. Myself and Mr. Rosen are here to provide any assistance with any questions should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
No question for staff, but at appropriate time, willing to make the recommended motion.
I see no questions, so go ahead. Councillor Hong, did you wish to?
I have a question.
Okay.
Great. Thank you through you to staff. Do we have an update on how many accidents have happened in the last year since Woodland shut down? I like to know those numbers if we have those numbers.
We don't have up-to-date accident statistics, but what we have done is we've looked at 5 continuous years of accidents at that location, and they're very consistent. And so typically what's seen is between 1 to 2 accidents per week continuously.
So you're saying that it's still happening now since Woodland has shut down?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, okay, so questioned? I've got a question if you don't.
I was just going to wait for somebody to make a motion.
Okay, thank you. So my question is to staff. When I go to page 48 and I look at the numbers, it looks as though the amount is 1.435 million, and it's been rounded up to 1.5. And I notice it says that the total potential costs related to the active rail crossing are approximately 1.5 million, and the city share would be half. So have Ministry of Transportation and Highways agreed to pay all of the, to pay 50% of the entire upgrade, including the potential upgrades required when you go from a 50-mile-an-hour train to a 40-mile-an-hour passenger train?
So our agreement with the Ministry of Transportation is that they will pay half of the project costs. So that would be a project cost.
Okay, so that's the potential future cost if rail upgrades occur that's noted above at 560,000?
So what that is so right now there's no high-speed trains that are traveling through that intersection. So we've talked to Southern Rail, and they're willing to let us proceed with the project without the what's called it's called the detection for the preemption of the signal. And so what it means is they have to be able to detect the train quite far away from the actual intersection. And so to be able to do that, it's actually fairly challenging from a technical standpoint. So that cost is about $560,000 to do that. So what they're willing to do is to put that on hold until like the Dayliner returns or there's high-speed rail that returns. So we'd have to hold that as a liability for a period of time.
But the province will still be in?
That's part of our agreement with the ministry is they're going to pay half of the total project costs, and that would be part of it.
That's a significant bonus. That's over $250,000, almost $300,000.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brennan, did you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
It slightly different variation of the question that the mayor asked, but because things have changed 1 year later, it looks as though the costs will need to be updated. I'm assuming that means that they'll be increased. Are we pretty certain that the province will cover those increased costs, the costs of the more expensive project this year than a year ago?
We can't speak for the province, but certainly what we would do is if council directs us to proceed with this, we would update the cost estimate given the current construction market conditions and any other factors such as the exchange rate and so on. And we would look at what the city's share is and what the province's share is. And, assuming both the city and the province want to proceed with it, we would do so at that time.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that council direct staff to proceed with the intersection upgrades to Northfield/Boundary Highway 19A.
Option number 1. So it's been moved by Councillor Yocum and seconded by Councillor Brennan. Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Did staff look at any realignments other than the one that was presented just over a year ago? Because there was a presentation by a person in the audience that talked about a straighter, different alignment for the road. Staff ever look at that?
Yes, staff looked at that option or concept that was presented by, I believe it was Dan Appel. And, in addition to that, staff had looked at, between 6 and 10 other options before the option that is currently proposed was sort of distilled out. And the challenge with the other options is that they're either really expensive or they require a lot of land or there's other challenges. In this particular case, the technical challenges around the rail crossing are so significant that the option that we've put forward is really, we believe, the best option.
Thank you. It's just this railway thing hanging over us, the cost of this railway, and the motions that are coming forward from other communities to put that back to a trailway instead of rails. So that's a concern for me. And I know most of the accidents seem to be rear-enders there when people are looking back up the highway and they come shooting off in Northfield. It would be almost, like I say, that's the toughest part of that intersection right there. And then people cutting in front of traffic coming down the highway is a dangerous little proposition. So I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I heard in the preamble that the certainty of rail, or the future of rail, is no more certain. And to me, I think, from what I'm learning at the regional district, here at the city, conversations that have taken place, that the future of rail is becoming more certain. Because it doesn't form part of provincial or federal platforms of acknowledgement and commitment in terms of the necessary monies to bring rail, commercially or passenger, back to a legitimate operation as a result of the amount of work and monies in what has been estimated in the hundreds of millions to ensure that the improvements. So when I hear the new detection system, which means upgrades to the intersections before and after, if you will, going north and south from Northfield. And to me, I believe that the intersection isn't safe, so I'd like to see improvements take place there. Obviously, who wouldn't? But I don't see the reason being rail improvements to improve the safety of the intersection when it's so uncertain with the amount of rail traffic that occurs today that will likely occur in the future. At the regional district level, the city of Parksville and the regional district of Nanaimo has agreed with the rails to trails concept to entertain with Island Corridor Foundation converting rail to heels and wheels. There's going to be there is a notice of motion on this agenda that I'll be asking to extend that notion in the city of Nanaimo limits to Nanoose-Parksville for a host of reasons that I won't take the time to get into now. But it behooves me to spend upwards of $2 million to improve a intersection, and I believe there's approximately 8 to 16 cars a week that travel north and south. 8 to 16 a week. And I believe we have somewhere in the high teens of crossings and intersections. That once we start to go down this road, I don't know how we go back. I don't know how we go backwards and say, well, we're committed to improving safety, which I think is really obviously a great idea, but I'm not in agreement with improving an intersection and then improving the intersections north and south thereof for the new detection program implemented by Transport Canada or whoever, and times $1.5 to $2.5 million expenditure for every rail crossing in the city of Nanaimo limits. Because again, once we start going down here, where do we stop? So it's a real, to me, it's a real double-edged sword. And obviously, I wish not to see any accidents or injuries or body or otherwise. But it's really hard for me to vote in favor of this, to speak in favor of this, when I don't support millions of dollars being spent on rail crossing improvements, because I'd prefer for our future to see rails removed. I think people don't know that there's 8 to 16 cars a week that, to my mind, could be on rubber. And there's a pending lawsuit north of Nanaimo, in Lantzville. There may be others in terms of a class action suit. Other nations. There is more. I haven't seen any movement whatsoever from the province or the federal governments to make this a priority. So it's an extremely challenging one for me to support. So, based on everything that I've said in too many minutes, I won't be supporting the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I will support the motion. I recall when it came before us a year ago, I struggled with this issue, and I, at that time, voted in favor of delaying any action on this intersection for the period of a year. In that time, nothing has happened in terms of change in the rail. And yes, it may well happen at some point in the future, but I can't be convinced that anything is going to happen differently with rail in the near future. And I don't want to be here a year from now dealing with this intersection again. I think it's a very unique intersection. It's a very dangerous intersection. And I think we need to move on this upgrade now, despite the cost. So I will support this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I too have some concerns with the potential of rail to trail and throwing almost, $1.5 million at a rail crossing that we might just end up taking out in a year or half a year or whatever. It also states in the report that the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has indicated they would respect the city's decision to defer the project again. So there is that. Question through you to staff. How many accidents have there been at that intersection since we deferred it the last time?
They've already answered that, Councillor.
Well, I missed it.
They don't have those numbers.
Okay, thank you. I just want to keep bringing these things up. They don't have the numbers, so.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Rail, I feel like, I know that this intersection needs work. The reason I voted to defer this last time was because of rail. I still think it's a waste of money to put that infrastructure in for rail. I still think the design isn't ideal. I think it needs a lot more work. It needs a turning lane off the highway. That's what it needs, going south. This design doesn't have it. It's the person that slows down to 15 before they make the turn from the highway onto Northfield. Because if that's the picture I have, I see that it doesn't, it needs one of those 100-yard slowing down merge lanes off the highway. That's what it can fix this. I think, I'm going to support this, but I would rather us put an intersection and lights up on Mary Ellen. That is a dangerous intersection. We're way more traffic up there than we are now. Since Woodlands is closed, that's what I'm saying is, let's get some real numbers, because in 2015, I think this was number 8 on ICBC's list with 54 accidents in 2015. Bowen Road on the highway was 70 or 80. And we haven't done anything with that intersection yet. So I'll reluctantly support this, but I'm hoping that staff are going to give us, before they go ahead, let's have a look, because I don't want to stall this. If the numbers are 54 a year, then we should get on with it, because I like to move on to Mary Ellen, and I like to move on to Bowen Road, because I think those intersections are more critical than this one. I think spending $1.5 million or whatever it is now for rail, I think it's a waste. I think we should redesign this now that Woodlands has been decommissioned. I think we can have an amazing little road network if we bought a corner off the school board. That little corner of that field, I think we can have a road that I can say we didn't waste money on this, and we're still getting 38 accidents as opposed to 54 because of the rear enders. I think that's still a waste of money. So unless we can fix this intersection where we can reduce it down drastically, I don't support it. But I will reluctantly support this, and with the hopes that staff have looked at all the options, including acquisition of a partial corner of Woodlands. So,
did staff wish to respond?
Yeah, I just had a couple of answers to a few of the questions that Councillor Beswick and Councillor Hong had. So just back to Councillor Beswick's comment about the number of rail crossings we have in the city. So the ENN rail on Vancouver Island is provincially regulated. The federal government has come out with some rail crossing standards in late 2015, early 2016 that applies to federally regulated rail. Now, my understanding is the province hasn't yet decided as to whether or not those federal standards are going to apply to the ENN. We keep asking them, but they haven't decided yet. If they do decide that those are going to apply, then the city has just under 30 crossings that would have to come into compliance with that standard. So that's one piece of it. In terms of Councillor Hong's question about a right turn deceleration lane from the highway onto Northfield, that is certainly a movement that we'd like to be able to accommodate. The challenge with it is the grade difference between the railroad tracks and the highway and the proximity of it. With an active railroad there, it's not possible to install a right turn deceleration lane. And just in terms of the number of accidents there per year, we get between 1 and 2 per week. So that puts the number between 50 and 100 accidents in the past year. So.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support any further delays on this. I think I read in the paper and elsewhere that citizens want this done. I think that they're really tired of waiting for that improvement. We can't improve the intersection without dealing with the rail. It's just that's the way it is. And we've had 1 year delay, and the costs have increased. If we delay it longer, the costs are going to increase again. Taking out the rails is not a given. As much as there are some communities and some regional districts that want it removed, we don't know today, and we are not likely to know next year, and we're probably not likely to know for some time, because taking up a rail includes much more than just a regional district saying, we don't want to be part of this. It's a much bigger question. It's a much bigger project. If we delay longer, we're likely to just see more accidents. We're likely to see more injuries, and there have been deaths there. I know at least one there. I don't want to see that again. This is a plan that the province has approved, and the province will pay half. And apparently they're even willing to pay half when we've caused some of the increased costs. So if we do it now, we get half paid. The citizens want it. And I would argue it's not either or. It isn't either Northfield or Mary Ellen. It's not. What gives us the either or is our reluctance to spend money on infrastructure. We need to deal with that in a separate discussion. But this discussion is, are we going to fund this? This came up to the last council. So this is a long time that we have been dealing with this. We can't just keep kicking this can down the road. We're going to lose half our funding for it. We're going to end up having to spend a lot more money, and we have no idea. We would be making that decision based on no information whatsoever, because we haven't a clue what's going to happen to the railway. We just don't know what's going to happen to it, but we know it's there now. We know it's a dangerous intersection, and we know that our citizens want that dealt with. So those three things tell me that this is a good decision, and I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum, have you spoken yet? Okay, so I'm going to bring you up next.
Thank you.
Councillor Yocum.
Yeah, thank you.
First time.
Just through yourself to staff, just quickly, it's a conversation. I think everyone's agreeing it's a nightmare intersection. We need change. How it looks, debatable, but we got to make sure what's happening is not happening anymore. At the same time, also, the railroad's a factor in this, and the provincial involvement with half the funding. Is there a way we could proceed, Mr. Rosen, with making it safer, without going the railroad component? Or is it all, it have to be intertwined, and the funding 100% all intertwined? I don't want to overcomplicate this. I do know I'm going to stand by the motion to do something, but I just wonder if there's options. Thank you.
Okay, to answer Councillor Yocum through the chair. So staff have already approached Southern Rail about trying to offset as much of the costs, the rail hardware costs, as possible until there's certainty around the future of rail. And so that's where that $560,000 advanced preemption detection comes in. So that's the piece that only is really necessary when high-speed rail arrives. So right now with freight trains traveling through there, they have a compliant intersection or a compliant hardware. And that's really what they're looking for when we upgrade the intersection. They want to ensure that it's safe and that it's compliant for their slow-speed freight. So that's really the minimum requirement there, and that's what we would be proceeding with if the project goes forward.
Councillor Fuller.
Okay, now I'm hearing some other information that I find really interesting. So the federal standards are different than provincial standards. Province hasn't decided if it's going to have the federal standards apply. We're planning on doing the minimum, which is what if I heard right, we're planning on doing the minimum safety standards. That's what I just heard. If that's the case, what happens if we're mandated to go to the federal standards or provincial standards if we're doing the minimum? I don't have a problem doing the minimum, but that could be a safety issue. And we're talking about safety here. We do need to move forward with this. We need to move forward with other intersections that would cost far less where there have been deaths. Just putting up some slow down signs would do that. One of those is right in front of my house. So it's all about safety. We need to move forward with this. But these standards are starting to get in the way. And we just may end up having to rip up whatever we do today, tomorrow. So I'm just curious how we're going to get around that, if anybody can answer that.
Councillor Fuller, through the chair. So when I said the minimum upgrades to the rail crossing, it's really the minimum to be compliant with the federal standards. So that crossing would be compliant. It would bring it up to the current standard.
I just wanted to say before we got to the question is that number one, it is an active railway from top to bottom, and it's not been decommissioned. So we have to treat it as an active railway, regardless of whether there's one car on it a day or 1,000 cars on it a day. When we look at the standards of the federal standards, it's expected that the BC Safety Council, as the regulator for British Columbia for a BC provincial railway, will adopt those standards. And the Southern Rail and ICF have done a cursory look at every crossing on Vancouver Island, and 85% of them meet the new standards. 85%. So everybody seems to have this idea that, oh my God, each one's going to be a $2 or $3 million bill. It's not. 85% already meet. The other thing, of course, is whether there's going to be rail tomorrow or the next day. The fact is that the corridor is owned by 15 First Nations and 5 regional districts, of which our voice is one. So, notwithstanding the fact that the City of Nanaimo or Regional District of Nanaimo or members of the Regional District of Nanaimo would like to pave or would like to rip up the rail, there's 19 other people that other parties that they need to get that blessing from. Councillor Kep.
Yeah, I guess the statistics always concern me, and we've heard from Southern Rail that it would be $10 to $20 million to fix the tracks and get it going, and then we hear $100 million from somebody else. My concern with the train tracks right now is adding cost to us. I'm not certain just by realigning that without those acceleration and deceleration lanes, by moving the stop line just up farther from the tracks is what we've done by buying that piece of property and looping everybody back through. I'm not certain that's going to be any more safe roadway, because we have really the busiest road is Northfield. So the traffic's still coming down Northfield, and people still have to cross Northfield to get to the hospital, which is one of our main areas for me to get to from that area, and crossing the train tracks. And then I'm not certain our beautiful ENN Trailway there, or whether it's going to be an effective method to cross it, because we've created a long intersection. So I can't support the motion that stands on the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. When we last discussed this a year ago, SVI, I believe, was the agency tasked with ordering the equipment for a City of Nanaimo project, and they were the sole sourcers of that equipment, which is a significant price, somewhere in the $600,000 or $700,000 range. And there's a considerable markup on those purchases, somewhere in the 60 to 70% range markup from one place ordered by the company that we're being instructed that we have to use. This is equipment that we have to use, only one place to get it. They order it, deliver it to us, we install it. Is there any, now with our new procurement opportunities that we are implementing, is there the ability for the city to order the equipment and save in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, or must we still go through SVI?
My understanding is for the city to proceed with this, we have to essentially sole source it to Southern Rail, who have their own vendor. There's very few vendors that provide this type of hardware in North America, and if we want to work around the railroad tracks, we essentially have to adhere to their requirements, and this is one of them. And you're right, there is some markup. It is hardware that is purchased out of the U.S., and they do mark it up. My understanding is there's some federal standards for the amount they're able to mark it up, and they mark it up less than that, but I'm not sure exactly what the number is.
The markup is significant. It's indeed significant. Thank you. My only other question would be to the mayor, and that is that the federal agencies indicate that 85% of our rail crossings meet the standards, or 85% of the rail crossings on Vancouver Island?
85% of the rail crossings on Vancouver Island.
So of our 30, we're not sure how many of ours do. When we were discussing with our bike trails and other crossings, I know when we were contemplating putting bike trails going across rails, the costs were significant to accommodate bikes and pedestrians, not cars, to the tune where our cycles for about a 2-kilometer stretch was in the millions of dollars, of which the majority of those monies were on rail crossings. Thank you.
I just wanted to address the issue with respect to the markup and the purchase of. There's 2 manufacturers that manufacture hardware for rail crossings, signals, so on and so forth. Southern Rail have chosen to go to one of them so that you don't end up with multiple inventories. We expect to be able to buy from them. We expect them to stock all the parts for them. We expect them to repair them. So they've chosen one of those 2 manufacturers in which to supply the parts. The next thing is with respect to markup. The markup and all of the labor when you work on a rail crossing anywhere in Canada is based not on a private company's desire for profit. It's based on the Canadian Transportation Agency Appendix A, which is a table which tells you this is what it's going to cost you for this item, whether it's in Nova Scotia or in Nanaimo. This is what you're going to charge for an hourly rate. This is how much you're going to charge to replace X number of feet of track, and so on and so forth. It's based on a Canadian-wide table. So if there's any implications that Southern Rail is somehow gouging us in any way, shape, or form, yes, they do take a markup. They're not ashamed of that. But they are the ones that supply the product. They're the ones that stock the spares. They're the ones that we call when we need repairs. And they will always have parts for that one particular brand. Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. My comment isn't where they shop and who they purchase from. My comment is in relation to the amount that they mark it up, full well knowing that we don't have an option. We don't have a choice. They go buy it. Are they negotiating a price that best reflects national purchasing, regional purchasing, local purchasing? So when they sole source essentially, and there's a price, and the markup is excessive. I've seen the invoices on the previous, a year ago, and the markup was significant. Significant. Not 10%, not 15, not 12, not 18, not something that I would consider to be reasonable. Significant. So I would like to see what the invoice reads with the percentage markup, regardless of cross-country standards and inventory supplies. If we want to talk inventory supplies, the corner of Bowen and the Island Highway has had a rail arm broken well before Christmas and not replaced yet. So perhaps we could ask them to check their inventory when they're going to replace that arm for the safety of the cars that are traveling through that intersection and those railways.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to be talking about a lot of different things here. I know they're all related, but I would like to come back to the fact that this motion deals with an intersection, a dangerous intersection, which we have delayed doing anything about for some time now, and we have a chance to do something and have the provincial government pay for half of it. And so, again, I'm going to support this recommendation, and I would like to see us move on this, and I would ask that you call the question.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp, Councillor Fuller. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, development permit application DP 1034-91 at Chapel Street, 91 Chapel Street. Be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's certainly my pleasure to bring forward a development permit application in our downtown core. 91 Chapel is currently a vacant property, and many will remember it as the site that was previously occupied by the old movie theatre. This application is for a 61-unit residential building with 16 two-bedroom units, 41 bedroom units, and 5 live-work studios. I would note that there was an earlier version of the report, which we still have on the screen. It's been revised with an updated report, so maybe I could ask that could be pulled up. The earlier version of the report cited a number of variances related to parking. Those variances have all been removed. Staff have worked up until the 11th hour with the applicant to revise the proposal, and all of the variances related to parking have now been removed. So the only variance that's being requested is a height variance from 19.8 meters to 23.2 meters. And I would note that the majority of that variance is for a small stairwell access to the roof. So the variance only comprises just over 7.5% of the total roof area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is great news. I would like to move the recommended motion.
Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Kipp.
Now, can I
Discussion.
speak to it?
You can speak to it?
Yes, please. This is good news because we have a plan for downtown that involves, I think in about 2002, we were looking for 10,000 more units, 5,000 more units. And slowly but surely we have been compiling these units, and this just adds to it. It's great news. It just means good things for our downtown, and I wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I support this recommendation as well, but one of the things that I always am curious about is what's to stop them from putting a for sale sign up? That really, really bugs me. They rezone it and then they put a for sale sign up and not build on it. So when we do variances, my question to staff is, can we force them, like give a time limit on the variance so they have to come back to us? So I want to make it difficult for them. I want people to build. I want them to develop it, but I don't want them to sell it and then it sits empty until somebody decides that they want to buy it and maybe they want to build on it. So are there time limits on variances?
Through your worship to Councillor Hong, yes. First of all, I would note that this is not a rezoning. The property's been zoned and they're proposing a development which is largely in compliance with the zoning that's been in place in the downtown for a number of years. So it's a development permit, and development permits have a 2-year before they expire, 2-year period before they expire.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, we are entertaining a parking revision, parking bylaw revision, if you will. When might we anticipate the results of that undertaking?
We're scheduled to bring that information forward for an introduction to council in June.
Thank you. All in favor of this project? I do have concerns about the majority of our permitting projects that have significant parking provisions that are being requested to be reduced. And in this particular case, I see that the visitor parking is only 2, reduced to 0 for a significant amount of units that are 2 bedrooms and then the various sizes. That's great. That's great. But I struggle with the thought that the only parking for visitors for a unit of this size is street parking in the downtown Chapel Street area. So I look forward to seeing the parking study come back because frankly, that's the only hang-ups. Typically, yes, we get a little bit of setback here and height variance there, which is typically not a big deal. But the parking seems to compound more problems, or more concerns, or more issues, or so we're trying to draw people and attract people to live downtown and work and play, and we're trying to encourage businesses to open businesses downtown, and the most frequent concern that I hear is, oh, there's no parking downtown, which I don't necessarily agree with, but there's no parking, so I don't come downtown anymore. So it seems like a sort of a catch-22 thing when we're allowing multi-unit locations not to have visitor parking, reducing parking by 10, 15, 20% and more. And I'm looking forward to seeing that addressed in June. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
I was actually not going to support this because of the parking variances, so I was quite happy to see them removed and that there are no variances being asked for parking right now. I do share Councillor Hong's concerns with the number of empty lots that are now up for sale that have had development permits, which increases the price of the lot because I do share that concern, but I'm not overly concerned with it on this one. And I'm going to support this because it's a height variance, and I don't think the height is too excessive for that area. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Definitely support this project. I just realized it's been a long night, long work day that we are the report. Dale, the numbers aren't being changed. I heard you say it earlier. Just a height variance. That's all.
That's correct. I apologize. There was a revised report that was circulated late, which had all of the parking variances removed with the exception of the height variances.
Perfect. Absolutely. The only comment I have is also, because I was going to support this, but I had a problem, but now it's not a problem about the reduced disability spots, but that's been resolved. And I was just, when someone mentioned the old Fiesta building, it brought me back to, I remember a packed theater watching the Titanic in there. So some good memories on that site. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Mr. Lindsay, one thing that struck me when reading the report is that everything was referenced in floor area ratio, whereas what we're used to, of course, is density is always referenced in units per hectare. Can you tell me when you go from units per hectare versus floor area ratio?
Units per hectare is often a number that we use in our policy documents when we're setting targets for a neighborhood or for a town center. Zoning bylaw often uses the term floor area ratio, floor space ratio, to actually define the scale of a building relative to the size of the property. So for the majority of the zones in the city of Nanaimo, multifamily zones would use an FAR as a way of regulating building massing.
Okay, thank you. There was something in the order of a $200,000 plus charge against this property when we were forced to go in and demolish the building. Can you tell me when that will be paid, or has it been paid?
My understanding is that would have been resolved when the property exchanged hands.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. See no further questions. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, development permit number 1035 at 5260 Dublin Way. Again, to be introduced by Mr. Lindsay, the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the final phase in what is known as the Pacific Station development, a very successful mixed-use development in the community. This is a final, as I mentioned, final phase. This is for a 60-unit, four-story building. There's two variances that are being requested for this application. The first is a height variance from 14 meters to 15 meters, and also a request for on-site parking reduction from 99 spaces to 80. So that, in terms of the bylaw, council's familiar, our bylaw requirements for parking are 1.66 stalls per unit. The variance would reduce this down to 1.33 stalls per unit.
Is there a mover to get the motion on the floor? Moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Hong. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Mr. Lindsay, I noticed that some of the parking in this project is underground. And what I did not see is how much or what percentage. Can you give me that information?
Sorry, Your Worship, there's an image on page 76 of the agenda which shows the breakdown. Don't know if I have the number of. I'm sorry, the report does not include the breakdown, but it's approximately 60% of the stalls are included under the building.
All right, thank you.
I see no further questions. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So next item is development permit at 1047, development permit number 1047 at 1825 and 1805 Summerhill Place, to be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Council's certainly familiar with this application. This is actually two purpose-built rental buildings which are currently under construction in the community. The development permit originally came forward to Council in June of last year. At that time, there was a parking variance request to 0.93 stalls per unit. That was denied by Council. Ultimately, there was a revised application that came forward a week or two later that had an approved parking ratio of 1.06. So at that time, it was still a variance from the 294 parking stalls required to 188. The applicants, as I mentioned, the buildings are under construction, and the proposal is to include a parking structure with underground parking for a portion of the units. The applicants are requesting an amendment to these original development permits in order to reduce the parking to 168 stalls, which would remove approximately 20 spaces from that parking structure. What I would note is since the time that we originally brought this development permit forward for Council's consideration, staff's work has been ongoing in terms of our proposed parking bylaw. And as Councillor Beswick mentioned, we're hoping to bring that forward in the short term. Right now, throughout the community, we look at all multifamily units basically the same, 1.66 per unit. The draft bylaw will look at composition, location, and tenure when determining parking requirements. And I emphasize the word that it's draft. This is a working draft at this point that's been prepared by staff. It has not been introduced to the committees. It has not been introduced to Council, and it has not had the opportunity for public review or comment. However, if you took the draft bylaw that staff are currently working with and applied it to this development, it would require approximately 0.89 stalls per unit, which would be a 158 parking stalls. Less than what is currently being requested under this variance application. So this evening, staff and ultimately the applicant are seeking Council's direction with respect to the variance request.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I just want to know what you mean by tenure for the buildings. Do you mean the difference between a condo and an apartment, or what do you mean?
Thank you, Worship. That's a good point. So through staff's research, we believe that there's evidence, there's support for looking at a reduction in parking requirements when a building is purpose-built rental. And these are recommendations that have come through a comprehensive parking review that was done in the Lower Mainland, for example. The Greater Vancouver area has made these recommendations. So the draft bylaw would look at actually proposing a 10% reduction in parking requirements for purpose-built rental buildings.
I'm going to invite, we've got two delegations that wish to speak to this item. The first one is Mr. Jim Goldsack. Good evening, sir.
Good
Can we
evening.
have your address for the record, please?
Okay, my name is Jim Goldsack of Nanaimo. Do you want my full address?
Yes, for this one, yes.
1659 Dufferin Crescent.
Thank you.
Okay. And again, good evening. I am speaking on behalf not only myself, but the Hospital Area Neighborhood Association, also known as HANA. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me time to speak on this application. It was back in June 2016 I appeared before you to speak against the request of a parking variance for the same development permit application. This council denied the developer his request of a parking variance of 0.93 spaces per unit. However, in June 20th, a week later, 2016, he updated the request to 1.06 parking spaces per unit, and this council accepted it. Today, the applicant is back and again requesting the parking variance of 0.95 spaces per unit. This means that of the 177 units, they are requesting a maximum of 168 spaces. And again, I stand before you to oppose this variance. I am well aware of the city staff conducting a parking review and the consideration to reduce vehicle trips and vehicle ownership with regards to access to transit, access to commercial services, access to major employment centers such as the hospital, increased density and unit mix in high-density family developments. Here are some of the issues my organization has come up with, and we'd like to identify. One, yes, there is access to transit, but I can tell you few folks are using the service. Why? Maybe because the service is not acceptable or the schedule is not conducive to most folks. Two, the developer is leading us to believe the tenants in this development will work in the area and walk to work. Therefore, they will not own a vehicle. Really? I don't think so. Three, we are aware that the developer is currently charging $30 per parking space per month, which has and will force more vehicles out onto the street. Four, the developer has had input with city staff regarding the parking bylaw review. Yet, the people, the citizens that actually live in the neighborhood were not consulted for their input. Five, Summerhill Place is in a cul-de-sac, which is off Dufferin Crescent. Dufferin Crescent was never designed for high traffic volume. It is narrow, winding, with limited parking. There's a section of Dufferin Crescent that does not even have a sidewalk, which is difficult for pedestrian traffic. 6, Townsite Road on the south side of this development has limited parking, and it's already full to capacity. 7, it is noted that at 1820 Summerhill Place, which is phase 1 of this complex, where there were 2 car share cooperative vehicles, they're no longer there. I wonder why. 8, the city has been giving parking variances for years, which has complicated matters even more in an already congested area. We need solutions. Parking variances is not one of those solutions. HANA has many concerns that residents living near and around the hospital area. Many members of HANA have voiced their concerns and anger regarding the street parking and have sent emails to me. With the permission of some of those writers, I will read excerpts of those concerns. The whole parking variance business has to stop completely. It has ruined the neighborhood. I agree with your objections, he's talking about me, to more parking variances, and I have read your message to the neighbors. I wonder if council has any idea how they are being manipulated time and time again at the expense of you and your good neighbors, and have become very, to the benefit of fattening the pocketbooks of the developers, who have become very slick at breaking the rules, and the rest of us are expected to follow them. They have learned from past experience that if they ask for the moon and the stars, they will at least get the moon. And other developers then follow their lead. Why not? Our parking regulations are a joke to them, and the variance loophole means potentially more money in their pockets, while causing more chaos and congestion in our streets. Developers are simply using the public streets that are owned by all taxpayers as free overflow parking for their private gain. and when will it end? They continue to push the boundaries, get away with it, and leave our neighborhoods congested and dangerous. They always cry about underground parking and parkades being too expensive. Too bad. It is time to require them to provide underground parking and parkades for the residents of these housing units. The need for parking and the use of cars is not going to stop. If anything, the advent of self-driving vehicles will increase the use of private vehicles, not decrease it. Add all this to the hospital parking problems, and what have we is a mess with no solution. Townsite Road is too narrow to accommodate traffic, and traffic on both sides of the road, not to mention the problems caused by all the access and egress sites on each side of the road. The nearby school is also suffering. I cannot understand why the city has allowed this unsafe situation to occur. And then to carry on, Council approved a plan for a new fire department last week. Isn't it odd that plans for public buildings include adequate parking spaces for all staff and public visitors, whereas residential neighborhoods dealing with developers who do not want to sacrifice money-making rental space for parking space must learn to live with clogged streets, insufficient parking, reduced visibility caused by the developers who will inevitably go home and leave the parking congestion behind for the neighborhood to deal with. We do not see variances for public buildings because the taxpayers pay for them. This is clearly a double standard. If the city has planned for parking as required by the city bylaws for a new fire hall, why aren't developers required to do the same? This one here is from another resident living in an area in a building with underground parking. I did see the Hannah email this morning and was surprised that Summerhill would try again for another variance because there is so much construction that if they say yes to this development, it sets a precedent for all the others. They should not have built without doing their own due diligence, and it's disgusting that they would try again. It is one of the reasons that so many people like to live in our complex with the underground parking for security and peace of mind. I think that the city needs to say no firmly and tell them not to waste council's time coming back wearing another mask, asking for variances. The last one I'd like to read from another resident in the area. The city block between Bowen Road and Boundary Road will soon have accommodation in 10 apartment buildings and 3 townhouse complexes. It will be one of the most densely populated city blocks in Nanaimo. The people living in these buildings have cars, and they must be provided parking spaces for their cars. If you choose to grant this parking variance, I ask, where are these cars going to be able to park? Dufferin Crescent and the surrounding streets are already filled with parked cars. I realize that it is the desire of Nanaimo Council to move the citizenry into alternate transportation modes. However, as green and modern as this ideal is, it's just not practical. Dufferin Crescent does not provide a safe walking environment, does not have a completed sidewalk on both sides of the street between Bowen and Boundary, nor does it have any pedestrian crosswalks between Bowen and Boundary. Walkers are often forced into the street because of the mud-filled stretches, creating dangerous conditions between people in the busy traffic. The traffic levels are extreme. In addition to the people living in the 10 apartment buildings and 3 townhouse complexes, this stretch of Dufferin is flanked by the hospital and all the accompanying health-related venues, such as labs, doctor's office, clinics, etc. While on the other end, on Bowen, are all the many commercial and retail outlets and restaurants. This is a highly congested and populated area.
1 minute, Mr. Goldsack.
Time up?
1 minute.
I appreciate that Council also wishes to encourage its citizens to use public transportation. However, at this time, this is not a viable option for many shift workers who stream into the Dufferin area. Nanaimo Transit does not currently operate 24 hours per day, 7 days a week, while the hospital and many of the surrounding businesses are open and working 7 days a week, year-round. People live here, people work here, people use their cars. These cars must be planned for and accommodated. In closing, we, the residents in the hospital area, are very concerned and oppose this application for a further parking variance. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Goldsack. Just a question to you. What do you think about pay parking?
Pay parking?
On the streets?
Pay parking on the streets?
If we came by with put a parking meter right there, it's all electronic now. We don't even have to get out of our cars unless you're writing a ticket. What's the neighborhood association think of that?
The association? Well, we really haven't talked about it. Personally, I think that if we did put parking on the streets, pay parking on the streets, it would have to be determined where. Is it around the hospital? I think around the hospital would probably work. But a lot of these cars now are parked 4, 5, 6 blocks away. And now that we're starting to see them on other side streets as well. And side streets we never used to see before, now they're parked there. And none of those streets, a lot of those streets don't even have sidewalks. So it's becoming very dangerous. I'll give you one example. On one of the streets, a small street, very narrow, cars are parked on both sides, no sidewalks, it's got some ditches. And I can tell you, a fuel truck tried to go in there to fill up a house with an elderly couple. They couldn't get in because they couldn't drive down that road.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Any further? Thank you.
Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We have a second delegation, Mr. Andre Molnar.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I have with me our architect, Neil Jacobson from Bensley Architects. The purpose of me being here is to let you ask me any questions you want to ask me, and basically just to state in a very short form that a year ago when we agreed to this development permit and building permit, we presented to you the studies from our well-educated university graduate consultants who basically studied traffic, and that's their profession, to be traffic engineers. And they told you and told us exactly what now your engineers and your well-educated traffic engineers are telling you, that the parking bylaws in the city of Nanaimo are not realistic. My problem personally is that we are building very badly needed rental housing in Nanaimo and all over British Columbia. And Nanaimo is the only city where we work where we don't get any help from the city to build rental housing. Your citizens line up for our housing, literally. I mean, we have had nothing but success renting out at an affordable price the product what we have built. We have built now, this is now over 400 apartments we have built in Nanaimo, and they successful because they affordable. And people have a very high quality new home where they enjoy living, and very few people can do that. The only way we can accomplish to do this if we have very low parking structure cost. And you forced us into building an underground parking structure, and at the end of the day, the tenant will have to pay much higher rent in this building than in the last building because the parking costs money. And there was no logical or factual reason. I understand because I'm doing this for a long time. If you look at me, I'm no spring chicken. So I've been around the block a few times that people come out of the woodwork and tell you all kind of things. But at the end of the day, we have educated engineers who study this and they work on this. They tell us how much parking we need, and we have to listen to them. And in this case, I am lucky because your engineers are starting to tell you what I told you a year ago. I didn't tell you, I just repeated what my engineers told me. I am no traffic engineer. I've just been dealing for 45 years with traffic engineers. But at the end of the day, all I'm asking you is please be, how should I put it, respectful to the fact that we are in a very thin margin business and we are forced to do extra parking, underground parking, which my tenants can't afford. and your citizens can't afford. And, at the end of the day, was basically a mistake a year ago for me to agree to it and for you to ask me to do it. And I came back to reconsider a mistake we made together. So please, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. And of course, Mr. Jacobson is here to answer your questions too.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Hong.
Just curious on when this will be done. When will your complex be complete? Phase 2 and 3.
About May 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping that you'd bring one of your operations people with you because I'm not sure you can answer the question. And that is, I like the approach of charging a fee for a parking space. And the reason I like it is because if I don't own a car, why would it be included in my rent?
Is not included in the rent.
Right.
We pay, it's $20 is the charge for the parking space.
So the earlier delegation said it was 30. Is it 20?
That was wrong information.
Okay, so it's 20. So I like that a la carte process. If I don't own a car, I don't want to pay.
In this building, we have many micro units, small units, and all kind of projections where we know that the tenants won't have cars and they won't have to pay.
So the last time we talked to you, you suggested that you were that you did have car share vehicles there, but that they had virtually no pickup. Maybe once a week they were being used.
Your Worship, you are correct. Unfortunately, the Nanaimo car share company, or is basically a society, I think, is not very well organized, and there is some problems with it. We have spent $40,000 on the 2 vehicles we provided to them, and we have no idea where the vehicles are today. They just disappeared in thin air, and we actually inquired and we get no answer. So we don't know what happened and how it is run, and obviously it's out of your hands and out of my hands. It's an independent society who runs this. But in Vancouver, where the car share companies are more sophisticated and they have bigger organizations just because more people use it, it's very successful. The car share is very successful.
Thank you very much, sir. I don't see any other questions for you. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by? Seconded by Councillor Beswick.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, there's a recommendation on page 90, what would it be, set 90?
Sorry, Worship, there is no recommendation. We are seeking
for guidance.
Council's direction. We can certainly provide draft motion if requested.
Thank you.
Actually, and there is, I think there's a motion on page 85, and it is on your annotated agenda, Your Worship. 85. And it is just that you provide direction to staff, but if somebody wanted to read that one out there.
Okay.
Move the recommendation to give it before the council consider the applicant's request to further reduce the required number of parking spaces from 188 to 168 for a multifamily development at 1825 and 1805 Summerhill Place, and provide direction regarding the proposed variance. So, to move the variance.
So, Councillor Kipp is going to move the recommendation. Is there a seconder to get on the floor? Well, he's making a motion to that.
It's saying to consider it, but it doesn't say what. It doesn't direct council. It doesn't give us a
to
idea
reduce
of what
reduce from 188 to 168 is the motion.
Okay, so the motion is that council reduce the required number of spaces. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll second it. But.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, you know what? It's probably the first time in a long time that I have said no on this. But I do think that the neighborhood has, for a long time, expressed concern. I think we're getting to a bit of a tipping point here, and the remarks about the lack of transit is a realistic assessment of what's going on. And so I think the reduction down to 168 from 188 is supportable, or no, the initial one a year ago was supportable, but this one is not for me.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I definitely will not be supporting any reduction on this one. I drive that area frequently, and it is nuts. It's a mess. It is literally, as Mr. Goldsack says, a mess. And, you know, sooner or later, someone's going to get hit. And we're just talking about improving an intersection because of a death. Well, sooner or later, someone is going to get hit. Needs a heck of a lot more work done to it. We've just heard that the parking revisions that we're looking at are going to recommend something like a 10% reduction for purpose built. Well, this is 43% from beginning to end, from what it first was to what they now want. That's 43% reduction. And to me, that's just ridiculous, so I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I cannot support any reduction either. And mainly for the reason that I believe, if I read this correctly, the request seems to be based on information in what is simply a draft proposal for future consideration by council. We have not even seen it yet, let alone agreed to it. Nor has the public had any input in this. So it might happen in the future that we look at a change to our parking bylaw, but it's not happening right now. And I think we need to deal with the rules as they stand. And considering the parking problems in that area, I just cannot support any reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I'd really like to see paid parking. I really, really would. It just bothers me that the developer gets to make money on parking and we don't when we're giving up space. And they're parking on public streets when the developer should provide parking for them and charge them. So I don't know when we can consider looking at this area. I think under the neighborhood plan when we're doing the hospital, that this area, since we got the new fancy parking meters, you put in your license plate, the guys just drive by. It's great. I would not approve, not agree of hiring another bylaw and getting another one of these cars to have parking in situations like this, where the city can generate some money for ourselves. Since we're $280 million short in the next 20 years, I'd like to figure out how to get some more money, and not by taxing people. I wouldn't mind charging for parking. So at this point, until we figure out what we're doing with that, I can't support it. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to swallow, especially if we do have pay parking in this area, specifically this street and boundary, that the tenants are going to have to go somewhere. And right now, I know we do counts of what is in the parking lot, but we don't do a count of who's parking on the street. So at this point, I can't support it for that reason. And like I said, if we had pay parking there and that parking lot that in stage one is still has empty and vacant spots, then I would support the variance. But at this point, I just can't judge on how many people are just being cheap and not paying the $20, $30 a month to park. So for that reason, I can't support this until we get some more information. And that's, I think, why I asked the date. Great, thank you.
I got a question for staff, and that is, can we put a covenant on properties or developments like this that says that any unit that has a registered vehicle must take a parking space? So in this one here, we were on Summerhill 1, we were told that notwithstanding the fact that staff has reported that there's 15 to 20 vehicles out on the road, that there's 11 to 12 parking spaces that are unrented. And I like the idea of the a la carte menu. If I don't have a car, I don't want to pay the extra $20 a month. If I'm an elderly lady who doesn't have a car, why would I pay the same as somebody who has a car? Because these things do cost money. So is it possible to do that?
Your Worship, I think there's probably a technical way to approach that and to achieve what you're asking. I think staff's comment would be, even if it was something we could register in a covenant, it would likely be very difficult to actually enforce such a restriction.
So when the traffic engineers tell us when they go to ICBC, one of the ways they determine demand is they look at the registered vehicles at a particular address. So if they can get that information, how come we can't?
Sorry, maybe I misunderstood your question. So absolutely, we can get a handle on how many vehicles are registered to that property. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be parking on that property.
So our challenge is the neighbors are distressed because there's cars parking out in the street. Yet there are empty parking spaces inside on the property, and it's only because of the $30 or $20 a month that's the case. How can we force the residents with vehicles to take a parking space?
I think it would go back to your earlier recommendation that you could possibly put a covenant in place that would say each unit has to have a parking stall that's provided as part of that unit. But again, it would be very difficult to monitor and enforce such a restriction.
Councilor Kip.
Well, thank you. Our big problem there is a traffic generator, is a regional hospital that won't pay for parking. And I'm not certain it's the people that live in the buildings that are parking all over, or if it's the staff coming in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for 3 shifts. And they're coming in from all over. and it's what we hear about is how lousy the cars are parked. So it's not really the road. It's the lousy drivers that are parking and blocking everything and just pull over wherever they want. So that should be a ticketed offense. That's part of it. But the other side is we have to accommodate people that are working, and we have to accommodate these mix of housing. We've been forcing this mix of housing for 20, 25 plus years to get reduced sizes, to get the pigeonhole units, to get a 1-bedroom, to get a 2-bedroom, and trying to determine who owns a car and who doesn't. And I'll agree, I have what's called EBS, that's empty bus syndrome. And I see them all over the place, and they start late. We heard a complaint where people can't get to the hospital from downtown because the bus leaves late and doesn't start for their shift. So for me, the reduction of parking is an ongoing concern, and I've noticed that you do see a lot of empty spots. I'll agree with you. I know right behind my house on the Cypress Street development, we reduced quite a significant amount. I haven't seen any parking because of that building on our street. But a commercial building went in on the highway, and now my street across the train tracks is just stuffed with cars. And the people park anywhere they want, everywhere, and you can barely get a car through there. So I'm not certain it's our design and a design of our roads or more of the people and how they park. And it'd be interesting to see how many of these units actually have empty sites that people aren't using. And the other side is, our roads were built by tax dollars and people are allowed to use them. I don't own the piece of property right in front of my house. It's for the public too. So to accommodate people and accommodate living and parking's an expensive proposition. And my car has about 15 or 20 parking sites waiting for it. One at the bank, one at the grocery store, one at the dentist. The parking spots waiting for me all over the world, and about $40,000 a spot. So the reduction of parking, the whole purpose of it is to try and get us out of our cars and into the buses. I'm just not certain our generation is ready for that. So it's a tough one for me, but I support the variance in parking right now.
Thank you very much. I tried to work some math backwards today on this one here. I will be supporting the reduction because I believe this cookie-cutter approach that we have to parking is archaic. Cities all across Canada are starting at 0, and they're working based on exactly the type of project you're putting in, where it's located, where it is in relation to transit, et cetera, et cetera. If you were to build a building, a 100-unit apartment building right next to Country Club Mall, right next to the bus loop, and took the exact same design building and put it out in the extreme south end of Extension, your parking requirements would be very, very, very different. Same building. So if you take, for example, on the commercial, we require 5.5 spaces per 100 square meters of occupied space. Yet, Canadian Tire will tell you that we can get away easily with 3. Yet, the medical professional building around the corner will say, no, we need 7. That variance of 4 is a huge difference. And yet, we've got a cookie-cutter approach at 5.5. You must have that. Somebody's getting an advantage if we require if we allow the variance. I looked at the numbers on this one here. Based on 294 required parking spaces, that represents $5.7 million to build parking. Or it equates to $30,500 per unit. Every single unit, $30,000 is going into putting a parking space for that based on our rules. If we go to the recommended that we see here today, or pardon me, the desired, that takes it down to $17,800 per unit, or a savings of $12,644. Fact is that this developer wants to pass those savings along to the tenants. It means they can charge less. They can be more competitive in the marketplace. A la carte parking is the way to go. If I don't own a car, I don't want to pay for a parking space. And when you force me to put in 1.66 units per unit, 1.66 stalls per unit, my rent goes up because the developer has to build more parking. My best example of parking based on our requirements that doesn't work is at Bowen and Meredith. Somebody said something about if this was a publicly funded facility, we wouldn't be doing variances. Well, we did a variance at Bowen and Meredith. There are 20 units of 300 square micro units, 300 square foot micro units. If we had required them to do the 1.66 formula, we would have required 34 parking spaces. We allowed them to do 1.0. So there's 20 parking spaces for 20 units. The most cars I've ever seen in that development is 4. So there's 16 parking spaces taking up space that there could have been another 4 units built of very, very needed affordable housing in Nanaimo. Parking doesn't come free. I support the variance. All right, Councillor Brennan.
Well, thank you, Councillor Kipp and Mayor McKay. You've convinced me that this variance is doable, and the argument with regard to the affordable, safe, decent, quality housing is what moved me. So thank you, and I will support the variance.
Yep, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. This area has been a concern for a decade. Not just the Summerhill, the town site, the Dufferin, the entire proximity in Hana around the hospital network. To the delegation's point, there is no sidewalks on Dufferin to the hospital and to connect Bowen Road, which is a failure that we haven't addressed, which also needs addressed to mitigate some of the concerns and issues about safety and accessibility and egress and all of those scenarios. So it's disconnected. I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all. That's why we do have variations. So when we do get the new parking bylaw study that comes back to us, we're still going to have people that are going to ask for variances to parking because it isn't one-size-fits-all. And whether, obviously, if it were out in the country, it would be different than where the area that we're talking about. And the area that we're talking about is extremely dense and extremely congested. The charging for parking in a building that you live in, of course, is an option. I suspect there's buildings that have washers and dryers that have coin-operated units that you can choose to use as well if you choose to or not. But the fact, I lived in a condo for 10 years where we had to pay for parking. And in talking to a new development that's going downtown, 46 units, that we just approved 2 weeks ago on the corner of Wallace, and there's going to be underground parking, and there's going to be one stall for every unit, and I guess there's going to be rental and opportunity to own. And I asked the developer, I said, why are you putting one parking stall for every unit when everybody else is doing less than that, and the likelihood of you getting, this is going to cost you more money, et cetera, et cetera. And his response was, because every person that we've spoken with that may consider moving downtown into these upscale apartments / townhouses / ownership units have declared that they won't unless they can have a parking stall, at least one, and that's why we're doing underground parking, obviously at an increased cost, because they want the safety and security of parking underground and the assurity that they have a place to park. And if they don't have a vehicle, then they've got a guest that can use their parking spot when they need it. So for many reasons, I won't be supporting the variance. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
I find the affordable rental thing just a tad suspect, especially now that we have a vacancy rate of 1.5% or less. I think it's less. I think it's far less. And just for the fun of it, I've been going through rentals at Summerhill on the internet, and bachelor units are going for $995. That's affordable. $1,611 for 2-bedroom. Yep, it's all affordable. So I don't buy the affordable thing. Yes, we need more rentals. We need a variety of rentals, but we don't need more cars parked out in the streets. It is dangerous. Take a drive down there sometime. I mean, it is nuts. So I'm not supporting this.
Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to remind you that after this item, there was a scheduled recess at 9 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Councillor Yocum.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just quickly, I won't be able to support the request as well. Reading the emails, but also from the first delegation this evening. And I view these variances of case by case. And in this case, it's I forget. So one of the council members said it's a mess, and I totally agree. Where I rode down town site the other day, and my daughter, we went to somewhere we were going there, but anyways, and it was just a mess going through there. Then we came back the other way, and it is a mess. So I will not be able to support the request for reducing the parking spaces. Thank you.
Councillor Hong, did you have something? I'm sorry, I might have knocked you off.
Yeah, just we talked about affordable housing. I could support this if there was guaranteed affordable housing. Exactly what Councillor Fuller said. $1,600 isn't affordable. $900 isn't affordable. So if the proponent were to come up with guaranteed affordable housing, can we do that, staff? Covenant to ensure that it is affordable?
As a broader picture.
Your Worship, certainly in cases where we've had applications come forward in the past, we've registered housing agreements to ensure affordability of housing units. So there is that ability under the legislation, yes.
Okay, so that would be the only way that I would support this variance, if that were the case. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can remember that the motion that's on the floor is that council reduce that the applicant's request to further reduce the required number of parking spaces from 188 to 168. That's what's on the table. So if you're not in favor of it, don't vote in favor of it. Okay. So all those in favor. All those in favor. So show. Okay. All those opposed. Show Councillor Yocum, Hong, Bestwick, Fuller, and Thorpe opposed. Motion is defeated. Do you require any further instructions, Mr. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lindsay. We will be taking our scheduled break now. 10 minutes.
Yes, can you please deal with my one item so I can go home?
Bring the meeting to order. Okay, the next item is rezoning application number RA 379 at 437 Wesley Street, and is to be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay, Director of Community Development. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. The application this evening is for rezoning RA 379, as you mentioned, at 437 Wesley. This is a site-specific amendment to allow for the use of a supervised consumption service on the subject property. As Council is aware, there has been a temporary overdose prevention site which has been operating out of this property for the past number of months, and that's under the provincial approvals. This is the next step, looking for a more permanent facility and ultimately seeking the federal approval. And the first step is to get support of the local government, and the way we're doing that is through site-specific rezoning for the property.
So, Councillor Kipp, you're moving the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hong. It's on the floor. Any discussion?
First reading first, right?
Yeah, thank you. Your Worship, through you to Councillor Kipp, if he could pass if he could read out the first reading of the bylaw.
Zoning amendment bylaw 2017-4500.108. Site-specific text amendment to the existing Quesnel Square DT7 zone to allow a supervised consumption service of permitted use at 437 Wesley Street. Pass first reading.
Thank you. So we'll consider Councillors Brennan and Hong having moved that. Okay. Councillor Kipp, who's going to second it then? Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Okay. Discussion. Councillor Fuller?
I'll wait until
okay. Second. Thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move zoning amendment bylaw 2017 number 4500.108 pass second reading and head to public hearing.
It's moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Hong. Councillor Fuller.
I'm going to support this, and one of the main reasons I'm going to support this is I want it to go to public hearing. The neighbors in the area have concerns, and those concerns are valid. So when we do this, we have to think really hard what we're doing. Now, we know why we set up the one early on in January. It was to save lives. We know why this one is there. It's to save lives. But there are issues. Tenants in the building are finding the people are not respecting their space. So that personally, I would prefer to see it on a piece of our property as a standalone, not in a residential building. And I'd prefer to see more than one. I'd like to see another one located up at the hospital area, possibly other ways of doing this. There's got to be a better way than a one location type of system. So I want to hear people come and speak. I want to hear their concerns. I believe everybody in here needs to hear their concerns because they are valid, and I'm going to support the motion to take it to public hearing because of that.
Thank you. So I've just got a question for staff, and that is that the definition of a supervised consumption service, as listed on page 96, means a health service provided for individuals to inject or otherwise consume illicit drugs within a supervised and controlled environment at a location specified in the terms and conditions of an exemption granted in accordance with provisions of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. So that means that the only thing that the only project that we are supporting by taking this to second reading on the bylaw is a safe consumption site or supervised consumption site. Am I correct on that?
That is correct, Your Worship. It'll do two things, though. It will introduce this bylaw as a use within our zoning bylaw. The only site in the city that will be designated for it, however, will be the subject property at this time. In the future, further applications could be made for other properties.
Thank you very much. So call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is correspondence. We have two pieces of correspondence. Somebody wish to move those? Moved by Councillor Bestwick. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thorpe to receive the correspondence. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So the next item is council appointments. These appointments are to the Tourism Advisory Committee. And I first want to thank all of those who applied for that committee. There were 32 applications, and the determination of the successful candidates was done by a senior member of staff based on a very sophisticated matrix of qualifications. The names of the successful applicants are Mr. Mike Boucher, I believe, Mr. Leif Bogwald, Mr. Dan Brady, Lex Dunn, Rosemary Gibson, Jen Houtby Ferguson, Dale Partridge, Mr. Robert Plant, Joan Spencer, Mr. Henry Traw, and Ms. Chow Chang. Thank you very much again for all the interest in that committee. Notice of motion. Next one is for Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Thank you. Just simply a notice of motion that in conjunction with the Regional District of Nanaimo, approving the following: conversion of the rail system from Parksville to Courtenay with a trail, and completion of a pedestrian-centric trail from Parksville to Coons. And whereas the funding for improvements to the rail corridor have not been delivered from the provincial government, that Council support the Friends of Rails to Trails Vancouver Island FORTVI acronym initiative to convert the ENN rail bed to a multi-use trail, and request that the Island Corridor Foundation coordinate with Fort VI volunteers to work toward accomplishing this goal.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
It's just a notice of motion.
Oh, pardon me. Notice of motion. Pardon me. Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. And my notice of motion, I'll get it refined for next time, is more roughly to direct staff to develop a consultation process for blasting in neighborhoods.
Thank you. And next item is under committee recommendations to the Finance and Audit Committee. Councillor Bestwick. Those are notices of motion. Oh.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, for these committee recommendations, yeah, they need to be moved separately because they're different recommendations. Like they're different grants, so you...
This is the committee recommendations,
yeah.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will so move that the Finance and Audit Committee recommends that Council approve a $14,316 Heritage Facade Grant to rehabilitate the exterior of Nanaimo Fire Hall 2 building located at 34 Nickel Street.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 2, to provide for the $9,316 Heritage Facade Grant shortfall through a budget transfer from the Heritage Home Grant Program.
Second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And 3.
Before you go into the third one, I'm just going to declare myself a conflict because I'm committed to one of these organizations that are getting funding to help them.
Thank you.
I should also step out because I actually donated mine.
Thank you. So, it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those.
Grant funding recommendations of $115,841 for eligible applications.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kemp. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Can somebody get Councillor Fuller? Councillor Fuller? There we go. Thank you. There's another piece of other business. Councillor Brennan.
Several weeks ago, we had a presentation from three members of the executive, I think, of Nanaimo Pride. They asked us for two things. They had two asks. One was to have the existing Pride crosswalks touched up in time for the parade. And secondly, they asked that the second request was for the city to take ownership of installing and removing the city-mandated barricades and signage required for street closures for the Pride Parade. I think I'm not sure if we advised them that we would get back to them, but I think there was a sense that we would get back to them. There was also some emails after that amongst council talking about being in favor, but we have done nothing. So I wanted to bring this forward tonight because this is the last opportunity we have. The Pride weekend is in early June, and so there will not be an opportunity to do this. So I suppose to put it on the floor, I would move that we have that the city have the existing Pride crosswalks touched up in time for the parade, and that city take ownership of installing and removing the city mandated barricades and signage required for street closures for the Pride Parade. And I put that out there so that we can have a discussion.
So it's been moved by Councillor Brennan and it's been seconded by Councillor Bestwick. And discussion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, a question to staff. And regarding the second ask, city taking responsibility to do the barriers and the signage, is that something that the city does for other parade events such as Bathtub Parade, Heritage Days Parade? I just want to clarify if we're being consistent or not.
Mr. McRae.
Yes, through your worship, the city's involved in city-sanctioned events, so things that we are asked to attend to or things that we're directed to by council, we do. This is not, quote-unquote, a city-sanctioned event, so it's not something we would normally do. Just to follow up on that email, we did receive it late in the day, so this is the first myself and staff have heard of this. So I've had a bit of a chance to prepare some financial numbers and some dedications that we would have to do if council wishes to hear them.
Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. So, city-sanctioned event. What's the Heritage Days? Is that a city-sanctioned event? So how are they doing barricades? And how are the bathtubs doing barricades?
Mr. McRae.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. With organizations like that, they're usually privately paid for, so their organization gets those things sorted out, whether it's the security, it's traffic control, it's other measures like that, but they're normally taken off by the organization.
So a follow-up on that. So what is the Pride asking the city to do? I'm confused now, because I thought they just wanted the stuff to put on the roads, and they have volunteers to man it. So they're asking our staff to man all of these stations? Is that what the ask was?
If I recall, the other parades, the city crews bring the barricades down, they put them in place, they generally take a position somewhere in the parade area, and then when the parade has gone by, they start collecting them back up and take them back to the yard. Last year, that's not what happened. Last year, we provided them with the barricades, but the Pride volunteers had to go to Public Works, pick them up, take them down, put them in place. When the parade was over, they then had to, in turn, take them back to Public Works. So that service of the city Public Works crews, putting them in place and then being there to collect them afterwards was not how it was handled last year. So they're asking that the city works crews.
Okay, so I understand. Okay, that I understand. But how did we do it last year for Heritage Days? How did we do it last year for bathtubs? Because they weren't city sanctioned events, and I don't think they went to the Public Works to get their stuff. Did they?
We're going to have to check back on this. I don't know how we're doing that. I find it odd that the city would allow a third party to come pick up our own equipment from our yard and put it down. It's possible that did happen. But what we have in front of us is the request now, so I think this is what you need to turn your minds to. They're asking to touch up the walkways, so that's $1,800. The cost for staff to take these things down, set them up, the overtime, et cetera, will be about $2,500 or $5,000. I think there was an additional ask within their email, which is to paint the other 2 sidewalks, which would be another $2,500. So this is sort of one of the challenges when we get things at the last minute. We weren't able to put a report together. The person that does all this type of stuff is usually Richard Harding in terms of dealing with these events. So we're at a bit of a disadvantage at this late hour with knowing the specifics to those other things. So I apologize for that. We can check on it.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I actually sent an email requesting the possibility of doing the other 2, and the cost seems pretty minimal to me at $2,500. But recognizing the lateness of this, they definitely need to be touched up. It's another area I walk by frequently, and they're looking pretty sketchy at this point. But I would really like to see the other 2 done as well. So I don't know if that's possible at this time or how we could fit that in. I don't know. Is it possible that we could do the other 2?
By amending the motion. There is a motion on the floor.
I'd like to make a friendly amendment to do the other 2 then. The other 2 walks at the same corner.
Okay, so I think one of the things we're going to have to instruct staff on is where the funding's going to come from. So I would suggest the only place that funding could come from at this particular point is from the council contingency fund.
Sure.
I'm not certain if there's available funds in that. It appears there is.
And through the
council. So on a friendly amendment to do the additional work and take the total cost from the council contingency fund. Okay?
Cool.
So the
So that's fine. But what I want to make a comment about is that this was actually brought to us at least 3 or 4 weeks ago. It isn't that I just came up with this idea on my own and got really late about it. This was asked of us, and we didn't pick up the ball on it. So, I mean, we could have said no or yes, but we didn't say anything, and that's why tonight it became an urgent matter, because if we don't deal with this question tonight, then it is a no, because there's no time. So that's why I brought it tonight, and I apologize if I took staff off guard, but I did, and I recognized it required more time to crunch some numbers, et cetera. But all of us got this morning, and so I just wanted to pick that ball up and make sure that we tidied up the request.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Definitely in support of the motion. Definitely support, and this isn't a fault anyway. We'll get her done. And the price, I don't want to be sound reckless with the people's monies, but for events like this, I'm definitely going to support as other community events as well. And I'm proud and honored to be part of a council that endorses events as such, and I do not ever want to be viewed or part of like council numerous years ago in the city which wouldn't even support the parade as such. So I'm really proud to go forward on this, and we do find monies last minute for other things, and I thank our 2 staff over there that are absolutely going to find it and make it work. So great, we got to make this happen. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I'd like to ask staff of the $5,000 to deliver the barriers. Is that the fee for that? I mean, I've seen the truck come down a few times, the trailer, and typically we rent out chairs and whatever from the city, so I never have a problem with people using city supplies if there's a process, but $5,000 to deliver the barriers and have some people on hand and then to pick them up.
How did we break that down? Or is it guesstimate?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Again, given the short notice that we were given on trying to figure out these numbers, these are estimates. What we're looking at is staff are having to come around 6 o'clock in the morning and set up, and it's an event size that we need multiple staff there. They need to be there during the event and after for breakdowns, so we're dealing with 6 or 8 hours worth of staff time with labor, plus we're dealing with the signage, et cetera. So we're dealing with approximate numbers at this time.
Thank you. Seems expensive. That's all.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I just support this, of course, but we just approved $115,000 for downtown event eligible applications for downtown events. And it would seem to me that this is a downtown event, and it would seem to me that this event would fall within the criteria of an application for this downtown event. It's going to be an annual event, just getting bigger and stronger. So we might wish to invite the Mr. Dagg and company and their committee to submit a formal application to avoid something like this slipping through the cracks in the future, and ensuring that we can find the monies well in advance for planning and preparation. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I agree. We probably need to tighten up around this. What I would like in that tightening up is to have some sort of definition of city-sanctioned event, because it's not something that I'm aware of. So that we need to tidy up too.
Thank you. Last word, Ms. Sammer.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with city sanctioned either. I'm not sure where that came from. I have read the email, so I'm not sure what we're talking about there. There's a lot of questions that need to be. This is a good example, like for our weekly briefings when we meet on the Tuesdays about agenda planning and items that need to be acted on. A lot of stuff does just go to mayor and council, and so we need to take. If mayor and council want to proceed on something or direct staff to do something between meetings, that's an ideal place to raise this so we can do the type of work that we need to come here to be able to give you this information. Because I'm even looking at this and going, if we're going to be putting stuff together, are we putting a route in? Have we booked the route? Do we need to get the RCMP doing it? Like, there's a lot of details that I don't know have been planned, and I don't have any information in front of me for that. So those are the things we can work together on. It definitely isn't about blame. This is about us being able to support you and give you accurate stuff and not just give you guesstimates. But we're doing our best so that we don't understate what this may cost, and you understand what needs to be done. Last year, I think we did it on a pretty expedited basis as well, figuring out how we could paint those crosswalks in sort of the same time period.
Thank you. Well, I think council needs to take responsibility. We didn't react to the request. So, Ms. Gurry, I'm going to take this as one motion. Thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, question period. Agenda items only, please.
Fred Taylor of Nanaimo. Through the chair to Councillor Bestwick. Your direction on the NN Railroad, would it be any conflict with the direction of the federal government for Confederation to have the railroad across Canada to end at Esquimalt?
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. So your question is whether I think that there's a conflict with the federal government if the rail service ended in Esquimalt?
That's the direction of the federal government 100 years ago, was it to end in Esquimalt for Confederation of BC joining Canada.
So I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand the question. If I think that we're in
conflict, change it to a walkway, we're losing our direction of the federal government to be a railroad to Esquimalt.
I would propose that we make the change from rail to the trail that is being proposed, if you will, from Parksville to Courtney, and that we fall within the, I don't know if we'd be in conflict or not, but I think if you don't entertain changes that are more reflective of the current benefits, then we would be negligent in not entertaining the initiative. Are we in conflict? Should we forever remain a rail service?
Should be talking to the federal government to change the direction, their orders for it to end in Esquimalt and take away the BC grant of many hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace the loss of taxation for property of the railroad going across BC and up the Vancouver Island.
Well, I would look forward to having that conversation in greater detail in 2 weeks when the notice of motion becomes a motion.
May I ask, and I've asked before to the chair, please, and staff, the question of Boundary Avenue is back on the council agenda. And I've asked before about a left-hand turn from Boundary to Northfield. What is the direction of council? Are you going to put those left-hand turns before you get to Northfield through the neighborhoods up Meredith? How is one going to do that for left-hand turns to go from Boundary to Northfield, because it's not in the plan?
Not in the plan. I just don't think it could be accommodated.
Pardon me?
I don't think it can be accommodated.
So then you were going to push those left-hand turns prior to get to Northfield up through neighborhoods?
I would say so, or plan early.
Hope the people are aware. Is there any indication from the provincial government or Department of Highways of their involvement to make the route or improve the route from BC Ferries to the Parkway up Northfield?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's what their desire was before, and I have said to council before, you could be having 19A completely through Nanaimo to Woodgrove from Chase River as your city road if you allow them to take over Northfield as a direction to the Parkway from BC Ferries. That's all they need. I was on that committee for the selection of the Parkway, sir.
Oh, thank you.
And my last question is, I keep hearing parking reduction in several places. I am aware there is a separate charge for parking the number of spaces we demand on, say, apartment sites, etc. Is there any way you could put into your zoning bylaw that if we require 100 spaces, you can't charge extra for 100 spaces in your rent? I'm aware of, say, other intersections that have taken over the roadways, parking, and for the lack of wanting to pay a fee in the on the property, and they take over that street, and we lose areas for buses to pull out and get off the traffic to save emission control and all this sort of stuff. It's just becoming a big mess.
So if I got your question, your question is whether we would put a bylaw in place that would not allow a la carte menu for rent plus parking?
Well, in my opinion, you need something that says you can't charge extra for parking on your property if we're demanding the parking space to be there to go for. If we want 100 parking spaces for 100 apartments, you've got to use them. You can't force the people for an extra money out on the street If you go down Townside Road right now, most of the contractors and the employees are parking in the parking lots across the street, the private parking lots, because Townside is plugged with cars, vehicles now. So the contractors, if you go watch them when they come off work at 4 o'clock, they're going into those parking lots behind some of those little strip malls and parking to get in their car, because there's no parking on Townside even for them, the contractors building the buildings.
Is it possible those cars are the cars of the other contractors?
What other contractors?
So you're saying that there are contractors that are parking in parking lots across the street because the street parking is already used. Is it possible that the street parking are also contractors? If I look at Summerhill 1, just a moment. If I look at Summerhill 1, there were, I think it was 1.35. Maybe somebody on council can correct me. 1.35 was the variance that was provided on that one there, and even though they charge extra for the parking, there's only 11 spaces that were not taken up. So the vast majority of the tenants had no issue with it.
If you go in Dufferin Crescent, sir, and there's a little side road goes into the back of all those first built apartments that face Townside, you'll see many people coming out and getting in their cars to avoid pay parking in the apartment parking lots.
But there's only 11 empty spaces.
No, there's a lot.
So
more.
There's
lot more.
The vast majority are paying the extra.
Yeah.
It's only $20 a month.
Yeah, I think to get this problem away from council is somehow you got to try and say you can't charge extra for the parking. If we're demanding 100 spaces, there's got to be 100 spaces that's included in the rent.
I think if we want to solve to be honest with you, if we want to solve the parking problems in the hospital area, we need to deal with the elephant in the room, and it's the hospital.
I'm not talking about the hospital area. I'm not talking about the hospital area, but some of you have talked about the hospital area. And sir, I ask you why you can't treat the hospital the same as Malaspina College, where they have control over the extension of 4th Street, a city street, and they charge for the parking on that area. And if you were to take areas around the hospital that don't interfere with residential and let the hospital charge and control it, it's not a cost to us for bylaw enforcement, and it makes people pay in a greater area for more spaces.
Not a bad idea. Thank you.
Leon Kate, 5936 Schooner Way. I've been following this boundary Northfield, and I just want everybody to sort of have an open mind here as I say this. What if we were to change the way that road operates? And I know you've passed something tonight, but this is $1.5 million, which there's still this railway issue that could happen and could increase the cost. I think the $1.5 million, knowing construction costs and what's going on in the province right now, might be a little low. So I want you to follow this. So if we were to shut down the right turn off of the highway going south onto Northfield, shut down the left turn off onto the highway going north onto Northfield, and force the habits of the drivers to go up to Dorman. So if you went off the ferry and you went up to Dorman, you're now turning left off the highway. You've got 3 roads. You've got a road that comes back. You've got a Labio Road. You've got Dorman going on to Northfield. So really what you're doing is diverting the traffic around that intersection, and you're not spending any money until you really find out what you need to do with that, because it's about safety. It's about people having blind spots. So if you looked at that way of that design, when you're on boundary for Fred, you're never looking right. You're always looking left. There's no traffic going to come anymore. So all I got to do is when I'm stopped at the stop sign, look to my left. If I see no cars, I don't even have to look at the blind spot. I can just go, because we're not creating any left-hand or right-hand turn onto Northfield anymore.
So, Mr. Cake, if we can answer your questions.
Yes.
So the first question would be.
So just with an open mind. Just imagine shutting down the right turn off of the highway going south onto Northfield. So if I was going south,
So that's a question?
yes,
Okay.
In the
So
design.
I'm not sure if there's any staff here from the road
well, I'm
group
presenting
that
it
could
for a thought because I'll present it later.
Well, then it's-
Because I know you've passed this
Yeah.
design.
So if we could stay with questions, please.
Well, the question is, would you consider it?
Well, we would
Does
need
anybody-
advice from our
does
staff. and there's
anybody
no-
follow what I'm
There's no
saying in
staff
regards
here
to this?
today, sir, that
Yes.
can answer the question.
Yeah. The question is, those two questions I presented, is that we were to shut down those two lanes, move the traffic to Dorman Road, reconfigure a light on the southbound lane on Dorman Road. It allows the number two rescue to come out on a light to jump on the highway, because right now they come out, they have that little blue flashing light. They try to access the highway with cars coming both ways. If you had a stoplight there going south, they jump across the highway. You control Northfield by getting rid of the problem. Take the problem and
Let's
get
stay
rid of
with questions, please.
it. Okay, there's 3 questions for you.
Okay, so
I'll
we're
present
not-
the questions to the city manager, because I'm on the Public Works Committee and I'm supposed to think, that's why I'm there. And these are the questions I think that if we had this on our agenda, we could throw it there and have a discussion, because there's engineers at the table. And like I say, I do this for a living. I see these drawings every day of my life. I see alternate ways of doing it. So I'm just presenting that because you did pass it tonight. It's going to go to tender. And I also, just last comment, one of the things just to pass on to City Council, putting out tenders right now for construction, road construction in Nanaimo, very, very busy. Our industry is very, very busy. As you saw on Ham Bay Road, you got no bidders. So I would be cautioned to tender calls right now that you're not going to get tender calls that are going to be inflated 20 and 30%.
Sir, do you have a question?
Yeah, just telling you that your tenders calls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good evening. Don Bonner from Nanaimo. I have a few questions here. I'm welcoming staff suggestion regarding the bylaw on your procedures be implemented correctly. And I'm asking the question of the mayor, based on that, do you think that the 3 correspondence emails put on the addendum on March 6th meeting promoting a yes vote would have been included in the addendum had the procedures bylaw been followed correctly?
I think staff should answer that question. Staff?
It's related to the agenda?
It's concerning late items.
Your Worship, he's asking you the question, so we'll defer to you. This is question period for council, and if things need to be referred to staff, we can report back at a later date.
So from what I heard tonight, I would say no.
That they wouldn't have been allowed on.
Mhm.
Okay. Also asked is, will the bylaw be applied fairly and equally? For example, if staff were to add something to the addendum, would they provide reasoning for why it was being put in as a late item?
I would defer that to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the procedure bylaw, there is a section, I believe it's 16, I was looking at it earlier, that has how late items work, the deadline for late items before the addendum is printed on the Friday. So those essential and administrative items, they would have to meet that criteria to be added to the addendum, yes. But that's up to the corporate officer to determine that, and that's in the bylaw as well.
Okay. And based on that, would item 13 of today's addendum not be included because it actually doesn't have really a time-critical issue?
Item 13.
It was the notice of motion by Councillor Bestwick. It's on the green piece of paper.
That was added at the last council meeting, and that's how notices of motions work.
Correct.
Finally, if you could turn to page, Your Worship, to page 12 of your agenda. Can I answer that?
Well, I think the clerk's already answered it.
Oh, I just want to know if I was just trying to find out a reasoning, for future references in how these things work in terms of late items. So I'm just asking, would that be yes or no as an addendum?
Reference to the notice of motion that was on the agenda tonight, and that I advised staff at the last meeting that I would be bringing forward this notice of motion, and I'd be working with staff on creating and crafting the motion to be added to this agenda. So
So I would
All procedures were followed precisely for number item 13 on today's agenda.
Well, it's on the addendum, but if you were doing it so early, why wasn't it on the agenda on Monday?
I believe the accurate answer to that question was because we took the week to craft the specifics of the motion, and there was enough time for it to be placed on. If you prefer that we take it up, I can deal with it in the middle of June, that's fine. Middle of July, matters not to me. But the procedure was entirely followed to the letter based on our clerk and our staff's direction.
Ms. Gurry. You're on.
Okay. Last Monday's meeting is when Councillor Beswick said he would be bringing forward a notice of motion. We print the agenda on Tuesday. There wasn't enough time for us to get it on the agenda, which is why it was on the addendum.
Yep. Ms. Sammer.
Yeah, certainly. I would like to remind us sort of the decorum that you read out at the beginning of the meeting, because this is a workplace for staff. And I take exception with the question, will staff, meaning the city clerk, be applying and exercising her authority in decision-making in a fair and equitable manner? And in the last year that I've worked with Ms. Gurry, I've seen nothing but the highest level of professionalism and decision-making being executed by her and her staff. Certainly, a question could be put to council when you're exercising it at this table for late agenda items. Will you be doing that fairly and equitably and following that? But to ask if staff are going to be doing it certainly just doesn't ring right with being respectful in our workplace. And I've seen nothing to indicate that Ms. Gurry is in any way in any breach of that. And I think as chair, that would be something that you could address as those things come up. I know sometimes it's challenging and it depends on how it's wording, but if you consider what is being suggested, I felt it necessary for me as the city manager to speak up to make sure that my staff are being respected and treated appropriately.
Thank you very much. But as the chair, I didn't see that. I didn't read the same thing into it. Thank you.
I sense it.
Anything else, sir?
Yes, if you'll turn to page 12 of your agenda. It's regarding the minutes of the in-camera meeting of April 19th. The meeting went into camera at 9:33 a.m., and 11 minutes later, all staff left the meeting. Now, the meeting was called only to deal with the annual report, so you need staff in the meeting to talk about the annual report. So my question is, what were you talking about for 14 minutes? Since you needed staff to talk about the annual report in that time period before they came back at, I believe it was 9:58.
I don't see the reference here.
Okay, it's on page 12.
Yeah.
The minutes for the April 19th, 2017 meeting.
Yes.
9:30 in the morning. You'll notice besides staff that all the staff vacated at 9:44 a.m. and returned at 9:58 a.m. Since the meeting was called to talk with staff about the annual report, the question is, what were you talking about during those 14 minutes that they weren't there?
So the recorded, Ms. Vanderhorf, the recording secretary vacated at 9:44 and returned at 9:58.
So did Mr. Mema, Mr. McCrae, L. Mercier, Mr. Cooper, and Jay Vanderhoof all exited at 9:44. It says right here in the minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Gurry.
No, my question is not so much, I'm not talking to staff on this. This is just a question for you, sir. What were you talking about since the meeting was called and specifically we, the public, were said this meeting was going in camera so you can talk about the annual report? You need staff to be able to do that. They weren't in the meeting, so what were you talking about?
Okay, so if I recall, it was the purpose of...
It's in camera, you can't say.
Your
Until it's
worship,
released, you can't say anything.
the meeting that he is speaking of actually moved in camera at 9:33 a.m., so you cannot answer his question.
Okay, thank you.
So can you answer the question, during that 14 minutes, were you talking about the items for which you went into the in-camera meeting?
Yes?
So you can assure me that even though staff wasn't there, you were only talking about the annual report?
Yes.
Can I ask the same question of the other councillors?
Point of order.
It's been answered.
Point of order, Your Worship. We don't disclose what we talk about. It's not always on the minutes. And we do not have to have staff present in our meetings. We do not have to have staff. We can boot them out and deal with whatever we want to deal with. That's just the way it is.
I believe also that the charter says that when you go into an in-camera meeting, you have to say ahead of time what you're going in for. And if you're going into in-camera meetings and then talking about anything else that comes to the top of your head, then you may not actually be in compliance with the charter.
And?
So you shouldn't be doing that?
No, we don't release in-camera information we talk about. And the in-camera
I'm
minutes.
not asking you to release
I'll agree with
in-camera
you.
information.
I will agree with you. The in-camera minutes lack detail.
I'm not asking you to release the in-camera minutes. All I'm asking you to say on record is that during that time period, you were only talking about the items for which you actually agreed to go in camera.
I never do that. I talk about everything all the time. Sorry.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Hong.
That discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, right there under that section, Section 98, Annual Municipal Report. During that time, we have our auditor that works for council. We kick the staff out to get an honest opinion without staff there.
Your auditor wasn't in the meeting.
The auditor was there for that meeting for us to discuss our annual reports.
Telling them that.
It doesn't show it.
It's in-camera stuff.
It's in camera stuff. So we go into camera.
All I'm asking.
It's just in camera. That's it.
Yeah. It's that simple. Well, these people think you can.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all. I just want to know that you're basically saying that yes, during that time period, you only talked about the items that you agreed to go in camera for.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, we had the meeting.
Is anybody else? I've got a whole phone list here. Ward is lit up. Sir.
My name is Tim McGrath. I live here in Nanaimo. I was here present this evening at the beginning when we had the discussion about decorum, politeness, respect. And I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor, do you think that you've treated Mr. Taylor politely with respect that he deserves?
Yes.
How many times did you interrupt?
Don't know, sir.
But that was part of the decorum, wasn't it? You're not supposed to interrupt when a person in the public is asking questions.
Okay, so I've answered your question,
You're not
sir.
supposed to be interrupting me right now.
I answered your question,
So
sir. What's your next question, sir?
I haven't finished the question, sir. So the situation is Mr. Taylor was speaking, and you consistently interrupted him when you said you're not supposed to. So I came here, I asked you, were you being polite? Were you following the rules of decorum? And you say yes. How can you rationalize the two?
Because I'm trying to keep the delegation to questions, sir.
When your friend, Mr. Bonner, appears, it was staff who had to intercede and teach you how to conduct a meeting.
Sir, do you have a question?
Other person came
Do you have a
up,
question, sir?
how can you rationalize your behavior?
I answered your question, sir. Do you have any other questions?
There was two questions. I asked you if Mr. Taylor, if you treated him correctly. Then I mentioned that staff had to tell you about Mr. Bonner. So do you feel that you were acting in your proper manner?
Yes, sir.
Not stopping.
Yes, sir.
Can you wait until I ask
I'm
the
answering
question?
your question, sir.
No, you're assuming you know the question.
I've answered your question, sir. Any other questions?
Are you going to conduct the meetings properly from here on in?
Of course.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Gurry, did you...
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to comment earlier that for the questions regarding the in-camera meeting, just if there is an attendee that attends a council meeting from the public or a business person, that sort of thing, their attendance is reflected in the actual in-camera minutes, which these are not. This is the open part before you proceed in camera.
Thank you. Sir.
Whoops. Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. This isn't really a question, it's a thank you. Can I say a thank you?
This is question period, sir.
And it was on the agenda. I'd like to thank staff and council for approving a grant for the Heritage Day Society. And as a member of Friends of Heritage Society, I would like to welcome all citizens in our city, and for that matter, folk on the island and the mainland, to come downtown on Sunday, May the 21st, to partake in the parade and the activities in Diana Krall Space and Matthew Sutton Park.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor?